Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell, and I'm recording this on October 14th. The markets haven't opened up yet, so good morning. We're going to go over markets. We're going to go over a video that I wanted to do yesterday, but I forgot to do it. It's interview by Bloomberg with Dr. Taleb. And then I want to jump into Al Jazeera to find out what's going on in the Middle East. And if we have time, I would like to go over some of the things that are going on in Asia. There was a news announcement late last night, about some sort of military drills by China in the Taiwan Straits. So that's going to be important. Let's drop into Bloomberg and listen to oil demand here.
A lot of traders bet on Russian oil being lost, but the sanctions were pretty toothless in terms of actual supply losses. It just was always about hurting revenues. So we've had all that oil go to the east. India and China are buying all that oil, and that's not been a problem.
Is it not a problem for Europe? I mean, has Europe weaned itself off of Russian energy?
By force, yes. I mean, Europe still consumes 14 to 15 million barrels per day of crude oil, as it refines about that much. I mean, it varies depending on your definition of Europe and so on. So it's not paying up for it. It's more expensive for Europe.
I want to audible here. We could do this with Emrys, and as we prepare for,
So the banner at the bottom, oil demand growth estimates for 2024 cut by 106,000 barrels a day.
as to Tony Blair, but he just can't do it in this time and place. Am I right?
I think that's fair. And I'm not 100% sure that he necessarily wants to be the next Tony Blair either, given everything else that's going on in the Middle East. And I think he's been very clear about where UK's position is. But I think he does have a lot of challenges.
They're talking about the minister. What I want to do is oil's trade, WTI oil is trading at about 74 and Brent is trading at about 77. The futures market at this moment is 5,877. And on the dashboard, that would be the ES ticker. But so 5,877 for futures. Market hasn't opened up yet. Once the market opens up, it'll be the spot. All right. What I want to do is talk about the VIX. The VIX is still slightly elevated. It's at 20. All right. If it goes back down to 12 or 15, that's like very calm. The markets are going to go up. So 20, 25, that's going to be, there's a little bit of risk in the market. All right. I still think that equities will continue to climb. I still have a target of year end of 5,800 to 6,000 for the S&P 500. All right. And I'm a little bit surprised. Let me give you my, hold on, let's listen in here.
Energy Aspects London for their brilliant breakout. I can't say enough. It's like Adam Szymanski, Paul, at Deutsche Bank years ago with Paul Sankey. It's like all supply and demand dynamics, the price theory, the microeconomics. It's not, some people go 60,000 feet and all that, and Reedy goes right into the dynamics of it.
Well, I can actually understand it. That's why I like
I
like it. I understand what you just said there.
And Reedy said, thank you so much. We are 8 minutes away from a conversation with Secure Starmer and Reedy giving us in good spirit a nice overlay of what's going on.
Okay, so I want to give you my take on oil. With the stress that's going on in the Middle East, I suspect that oil will go up, but you have this demand push down because demand is declining, especially because of Asia, that there's a big demand push down onto the price of oil. So there's two things that are fighting: the risk in the Middle East, and which is a perceived risk, all right, but not fully materialized because oil fields haven't been hit yet, and then not a perceived risk, but a real economic data showing that there's a decline in demand because of economic slowdown in Asia. So you have two variables fighting each other. But like I said, depending on what time period you're in, depends on which variable has more weight, because everything's fluid. So at this moment in time, demand is a stronger variable that's pushing down oil. Now, it was trading at about 75 or so. I think it was trading around 75 or so around Friday or so, and then it started to come down, or Thursday. So you have this move of about $2 plus or minus, right? You hear some bad news in the Middle East, most likely oil is going to skyrocket back up past 75 for WTI, all right? And for Brent, you're talking about almost $80 a barrel again. So that's the news event. Now, the next 2 days, if there's nothing that happens in the Middle East, the markets are going to digest this lower demand for oil, and oil may go back down to about $72 a barrel for WTI. But it just depends on what happens. There's a lot of event risk that's taking place right now. And then the jobs data, economic data that's coming out, earnings are coming out. So we'll see. What I want to do is I want to go to the Black Swan interview. I thought this was a good interview. I was going to do it yesterday, but I forgot. So let's do it today. I give you my take on it. I have looked at life through the lens of chaos theory. All right. And Dr. Taleb was the one that wrote The Black Swan. Now, he was an options trader, and if anyone that has played options or futures, they realize that there are these price is heavily affected by implied volatility, and there's these surfaces that are developed with implied volatility and actually the price and time. And so you start getting a sense of how risk seems to creep in, and sometimes everything seems to be copacetic, and then all of a sudden there's this an event that takes place and radically changes the volatility in the price curve in the options market or the futures market. So he's a big options trader, and he's tried to explain the market from that lens. But you can apply this concept to many other systems, social systems, or even mechanical systems, right? Any system that there are variables that could get out of sync and create a dynamic that you didn't expect. All right, so now he's talking about the fragility of markets, which is another book that I read. He wrote the Black Swan book and Fragility, which is a great book. And I feel that the Fragility is just a spin-off of the Black Swan. But let's listen in onto the interview. Now, the problem with his
your colleague,
there is a problem with the way he talks. He has a tendency to be long-winded. All right, but just listen carefully to what he's saying. And he's basically saying that markets are building up systemic risk and that something is going to happen. But he has a tendency to not be so to the point. He walks around with his speech.
Mark Spitznagel, who was over at Universum, he had been bullish on the market, but has been voicing more concerns.
Yes.
How do you feel about where we stand right now?
So let me qualify by saying that Universal is market blind, formally market blind, but we're humans, we have opinions about the world. And the whole idea, the market sentiment was that you need a big tail hedge and you need a big position compensation because the market rally, allows you to have a larger position. If at the tail hedge allows you to have a larger position, so that was his position. But now we have a lot of risks building up. Okay, whether the first one I think is, of course, we're starting to pay for debt, and year after year taking a larger portion of the budget. So it's not.
So this let me just dissect what he said. Sometimes people need to hedge their portfolio. Now this is a more advanced concept, right? And when they hit, especially institutional investors, when they hedge, all right, they may have a very big long position in the market, maybe in equities, let's say. And they want to hedge their risk. And so what they do is they buy a option that's way out of the money. That's very, very cheap. All right. That if a fat tail event happens, a black swan event happens, they can make a lot of money on that. But usually that option expires, and that option, you don't make any money on that option. All right. You lose money on that option. But there are these rare cases where you can make a lot of money. All right. So you lose money more often in terms of number of days when you play this kind of strategy. But if you time it right, you can make a lot of money. The issue is that most people don't have the capital or the patience to take those financial losses every time that they're resetting their short position that's way out of the money. All right. So they may buy, there's a lot of ways to do it, but you can buy these way out of the money options. So if you buy a call, you're expecting that the market's going to go up. Well, if you buy a put, you're expecting the market to go down. So you can buy a lot of put options if you think the market is really going to tank, right? Because of some sort of systemic risk. But most of the time, in that case, you would be losing money, all right? Because the market keeps on moving up and up and up. But if you can time that systemic risk right, then you can make a lot of money doing this way out of the money options. There's other ways to do it too. Where you can sell options, not just buy options. But that's what he's talking about. You got this fat tail risk that you're hedging. You're hedging. You have this long position in the market, and you have this negative thing that could happen that could drive the market down a lot, like a Lehman, all right, or a nuclear war, or oil fields getting knocked out by Israel, or Iran knocking out Saudi Arabia's oil fields. That would be a risk that could affect markets, and that people can position themselves in the options market to take advantage of that. All right. So that's what he's talking about with the fat tail risk and hedging for it.
Full yet. Europe is worse than us. When you have debt, you need to grow very fast. We're growing, but we should grow faster to be able to control that debt. That's a big thing. The second one is, and I'm really worried, if someone asked me what are the top two biggest financial mistake made in the 21st century, one of them would be confiscation of assets by, after the Ukraine war, of people, because this kind of thing can do once. So the United States bullied Europe to participate in the confiscation of assets of all, some of the relevant people that, with vague links to the Russian regime. And it may make sense maybe from a justice standpoint, but you got to remember that it's not going to encourage people to invest in the system, okay? So
transactions are still conducted in US dollars, but we're seeing more and more the storage in gold, and you see it all back, whether central banks and individuals, okay, people want out of that system. So I'm really afraid of a progressive loss of the role of the dollar in, in the global transactions.
It's interesting. The dollar fear has been a very real one for many investors, but you've seen dollar kind of supremacy still reign.
I think it raised transaction-wise, but that people conduct not only the transaction in dollars, they exchange dollars, but they don't store it in dollars. And that is where the problem is.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned oil for just a moment there. With all the geopolitical risk we're seeing, particularly in the Middle East, you've seen Brent rise above $80. And where do you think it goes from here?
No,
Before he answers that question, S&P 500, the market is opened up. The S&P 500 is at 5,839 at this moment. Yeah. So I've been telling you that it was going to go up, and it's been going up. Alex Jones kept on saying it was going to go down, and Alex Jones is not right. Amazing.
A big, I would say geopolitical event, small probability, not very high, because should that event happen, oil would be way, way above 80, as you could expect. We'd have a worse than 1973 oil crisis, because we have a more fragile, more interactive system than 1973. So, but I think this is the market's pricing in justifiably a small probability of that. People are aware of that possibility, but they're not putting too much trust in such a forecast.
So you mentioned gold for a minute here. How much are you willing to be buying gold at this moment too? And do you buy it as a kind of answer to your concerns about?
I'm not a gold buyer. I would say that I'm more of a my focus would be more on being hedged against a eventual market collapse, because we're more fragile than we were, probably at any point in the last 20 years. So if not, 30 years, we're very fragile. And also, you've got to realize.
This is the reason why I said months ago that the market is going to be higher. All right. 5,800 is my target for year-end close to 6,000. But at that 6,000 mark, I'm very concerned. All right. And I need to see the structure that's developing between now and that 6,000 print for the S&P 500. Because I think that is where you're going to start seeing the cracks. And so you got to start hearing, listening to what's going on internationally. You need to start listening to what's going on with our trade deficit, the weakening or the strengthening of different currencies, the weakening and strengthening of different bond markets, the unemployment rate, the inflation. You got to really pay attention now. All right. Once we hit that 6,000 mark on the S&P 500. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't go up. It may go up even more. But I think there are traders and investors that are concerned about this. Now, we also have to think, when is the next big wave of retirees that may be cashing out their retirement? And are there stresses with pensions? Most likely you won't be hearing stresses with pensions until the actual market starts to downturn. And then there are pension shortfalls that start to take place at the city level and also at the Fortune 500 companies, all right? Especially when you're talking about, the big three for automotive. So you got to really pay attention. But right now, there's still fuel for that market to go up. Now, maybe it goes up to 6,500. But you got to understand the structure and see where the risks are. is I think risks are building up. He's right about that. Risks are building up. And I think that it's really not, lately I've been looking at two FID sequences, a short FID sequence with the market rally that has been around for over a year and a half, and the FID sequence that starts with the crash of 2020. I think that there's one other FID sequence that's around 2016, and then one going all the way back to Lehman. All right, and there is a 4 FID sequence convergence. Now, that's my theory. That's my hypothesis, I should say. I have to do the analysis to see if that is the case, but I can't do that until I see the structure at 6,000. But if there is an alignment that's taking place, which is possible, especially with Lehman, there will be a crash. But the thing is that we don't know what the structure is yet. Until that structure evolves and shows itself at the 6,000 mark, and we understand what our deficits are. You know, do we have a deficit problem? Do we have a war, a world war? These are all factors that are going to change the whole dynamic of the markets. There's many, many variables here. But there is, when you look at just the debt issue in the United States and this coming online of AI and how it may actually supplant workers, that could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and equities start to go down, and we're in a long-term bear market. But we don't know yet. I'm not saying it's gonna, that it's definitely gonna happen, but there are these warnings that it's possible that this happens. If we do the right thing, then markets will stabilize. If we do the wrong thing and really surge the debt, I think we're going to have another Lehman.
The big rally in the S&P 500 over the past 12 months is attributable to a very small number of firms linked to AI. Now, AI is probably going to be the best investment, but maybe not at these firms. In other words, they may not be representative of the growth of AI. Because remember, when the internet started, everybody used Alta Vista. They were one of the pioneers, and then we switched to Google. Okay, so in other words, some existing firms had a huge capitalization, gains in trillions, owing to the promise of AI, and someone else may come in and take the business away from them.
Yeah, you've navigated.
Look at when it comes to PCs. Look at what IBM and IBM clones, and then all of a sudden Apple comes in, right? I think that OpenAI, with it coming on board, really clipped Google. Google did not expect that. So he's right about that.
Significant market moments in history, Black Monday,
Yes.
2008. How do you see this moment? You talked about fragility in the market today. The market has shrugged off almost everything this year.
What happened is like these crises happen when you expect them the least, which is why people don't have any protection. They're overexposed to the market. And I think it's very similar to the environment we had in previous collapses. And the market becomes complacent. People are used to it. They may have some kind of precaution in the beginning, but then they throw precaution to the wind, get more rally, and that's when vulnerability is going to be at its maximum.
What are the words that you would use at this juncture? Are we in a bubble? Is there still animal spirits jumping around? And what is causing it? What is causing the exuberance we're seeing in the market today?
I think that we are coming out of an environment of very low interest rates that taught people to avoid conservative investments and go into assets that can gain in value. So people are used to investing in the market, used to like investing in the market. And that was, I think, Mark Snagel's point, is that it's attracting more and more people, and has more. The reasons they got in, you know, are there. Okay, so nothing has changed. But all we need is just a small change in perspective. You see, to expose the fragility of it. We have valuations that are crazy, built on a lot of hope, and the economy is very confusing. You see, so I want you to hear stories here and stories there. Okay, is it overheating here, or is it cooling off there? You see, so we don't have a classical environment for us to make judgments. So which is why I would say that one has to be schizophrenic, extremely bullish, while believing in a total collapse. In other words, tail risk hedging. Okay, that's Mark's point. Although I think Mark, as you said, is less bullish than he was, or maybe he's even waiting for the first shoe to drop.
Well, how does this time compare to other times in history? Another thing Mark mentioned is that we're really vulnerable to black swan events. I thought that was an interesting comment because as long as I've known you, you've been very reticent to call out black swan events.
No, but we have a fragile system. Okay, and we have more interdependence, which was shown during COVID, between world economies. We have more globalization, almost, you know, at its peak, so more dependence between economies. So in other words, if something collapses, it causes feedback loops. We have more debt in the Western world relative to, particularly debt relative to growth, than we can handle. And what's bad here is that, and sad is that, you know, as you get richer, typically, you start having more debt, but your incentive to grow isn't there anymore. So we are now probably the richest we've ever been, and we've never had more debt. And it makes no sense because we have to grow out of this.
To that end of the debt market, do you think that the U.S. is going to be able to continue to issue it in the way that it has?
No.
Will there be foreigners to buy U.S. debt?
That's exactly why I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what the current administration had done in 2022 when they confiscated assets. It doesn't encourage people to invest in new currency because the first geopolitical problem, and you may be, if you're, let's say that you're a citizen of countries that are, you know, in the Middle East or in Asia or you know, or even in Eastern Europe, you don't want to be, you don't want your money taken away from you. You see, once you do it once, you can do it once. It's not the kind of thing that you can do twice. So that is harming the dollar and harming the United States enormously. And I think President Trump mentioned that. He said we shouldn't be freezing assets.
There's nothing more powerful than you making your thing happen. Really going for it. Doing business on your terms.
So I think that was a good video that I wanted to do yesterday, but I forgot. But big takeaway, markets are developing risk. And there are a lot of these different variables. The debt of the nation, people have over leveraged and over invested in the equity market. The viability of individual jobs in sectors because of the implementation of AI. International risk, especially war with China and the war in the Middle East. These are only some of the variables involved in potentially markets crashing. In addition, I think there's another big wave of retirees that that will affect the market, the housing market and the equity market. If there is a big wave of retirees that need assets, they may sell out their assets and move them into safe fixed income. And so that means that there's a big drain out of the equity market. So prices would fall. And some of them may decide to actually sell their homes. So there may be an increased supply of homes in suburbia in the United States. I have to look at it a little bit more on the potentiality of that group retiring. But I think there's another wave of retirees that are starting to kick in here that may affect the market. With that said, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen peptides. This is great for building up and helping with bones and joints, your skin. They'll help with your skin, your hair, your nails. It has a great amino acid profile. So there's the typical amino acid profile. And you get a big scooper here. You mix it with your food or with filtered water. Take it every day. Some people even mix it with milk. And improve your skin and your bones and your joints. It's a great way to add to kind of like this anti-aging protocol. All right. Now you get huge benefits with skin if you couple it with C60, the vitamin C, the gel, and the resveratrol. And you can get all of that with my anti-aging skin health boxes on my store. But you can buy individual items too. But to improve your skin and your bones and your joints, your hair, your nails, please go to my store and get the collagen. Now, what I like also to talk about is that I have these structural nano silver soaps. I have 5 different varieties. This one happens to be lemongrass, and this one happens to be charcoal tea tree. Please go to my store, get a couple bars for your household. This is made from structural nano silver. It'll neutralize pathogens. It's very high quality soap. It's way better than stuff that you may purchase at the grocery store that's full of chemicals. So please go to my store and get a couple bars of the structural nano silver soap. I have 5 different varieties. And since we were talking about the gel with the collagen, structural nano silver gel is really important to use every day for skincare. All right. You can put it on your skin, and then let's say right before you go to bed and then exfoliate in the morning, you'll notice your skin's clearer and tighter, especially around your face. So it's a great way to topically treat your skin. The collagen, when you cross-link it with vitamin C and filtered water, then what will happen is that you're improving the dermal layer of your skin. So it'll look younger. And then the basal layer can be improved by taking C60 and resveratrol. But structural nano silver gel is a daily skincare routine is a great product. It's a dual purpose product. If you have a cut, it'll heal the cut quicker because it keeps the cut, the abrasion or the minor burn clean. In addition, it'll neutralize pathogens. So you can put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your eyes, around your ears. Lightly coat your nostrils, and it'll stay active for 5+ hours. That way, you're maintaining the mucosal barrier for your nostrils and you're neutralizing pathogens. Very important during the cold season. So if you're at work or if you're in school or someone at home or whatever that's sick and you want to prevent you from getting sick, great way is to use the structural nano silver gel. Toothpaste. This structural nano silver toothpaste has no fluoride in it. It will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce gingivitis, reduce plaque. It'll neutralize pathogens, and with good oral hygiene, you are reducing the chances of cardiovascular disease and valvular disease. This is the best toothpaste that you can buy. Way better than anything that Alex Jones sells. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the toothpaste. Get a couple tubes of this or a few tubes for your household. It's a very high quality toothpaste. Helps support my work. And lastly, we're in the cold season in the United States. Many, many people in New York have colds. I am sure many people around where you live have colds. I have structural nano silver drops in cherry in 100 count, honey and lemon in 100 count, and also blueberry in 100 count. I also have Manuka honey lozenges in a 21 count, The moment you have that irritation, you want to take the lozenges or the drops. It'll neutralize the pathogen, and it'll also create this secretion that allows you to maintain that mucosal barrier on your epithelial lining, and that way you are reducing the chances of further infection. The moment you start having irritation, you want to be taking these. Very important to mitigate, let's say, the common cold or whatever. There are other things that are floating around that are not just the common cold. But please, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the lozenges and the drops for the cold season. Very important, right? Mitigate that problem right away. All right, let's take a look at what Al Jazeera has to say. What are they talking about here? Oh, this is sports. Al Jazeera. Oh, wait, I think they're switching out.
With more of today's top stories. Thanks for watching.
They're switching here, they're switching. Okay, let's see here. What's going on here?
Of talent that we've trained overseas and in India. We have our own internal skill building center where we train on site.
Serum started with just producing vaccine for tetanus, but it's producing a lot more vaccines now. What is the next big thing you think?
A global pandemic flu vaccine is something that we're working on. I think the world will need that, not only for the annual flu cases, but not.
I don't even want to hear it.
Targeted list of investors over the next 2 to 3 years. An investment like that gives us some credibility and gives us a little bit of staying power as I go in and talk to other investors.
With the SPAC pipe now closed, Archer's facing a new phase of raising capital.
I know the folks who.
Okay, so they're going through a commercial break here. So what I'm going to do is just talk about some other products I have. I have the Max 35. Max 35 is a structural nanosilver liquid. Take a teaspoon of it a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle, swallow. It'll neutralize pathogens and maintain that mucosal barrier, really important. You can get it either in a Max 35 or a Max 14. I take it every day. Take a teaspoon of it a day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. Multivitamin is really important to take. Why? Because they are cofactors for enzymatic activity. Your cells have lots of these different enzymes, right? And they need cofactors. They need a little bit of help from vitamins and minerals to be able to perform properly. So with a good multivitamin, you're increasing the cellular processes of these enzymes. So please go to my store, get the multivitamin. It's easy to digest. It has a great, vitamin profile, and it's a great way to just add that to your daily routine and go and get on a health journey. All right. Even if you have a well-balanced diet, you are going to need additional vitamins and minerals, especially when you're older, to be able to have your body repair and recover from some of the effects of modern life. All right. We're bombarded by chemicals. We're bombarded by different types of radiations and, at different spectrums. And our body is affected by it. Well, you need to not just eat a balanced diet. You also have to take more supplementation to be able, and other things like exercise, to mitigate some of the problems that modern society does to our body. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this multivitamin. It's easy to digest. It's a great way to start you on the journey of repairing your body, improving your endocrine system, and improving your immune system, and slowing down the aging process. All right, let's go to John Tucker here, see what's going on in the market. S&P 500.
Your timetable, learn more at idkr.com/outletfly. S&P 500, record territory, major stock averages. Overall, mixed right now. You have the 5 of the 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500. Higher technology, that's in the lead. Vistra, the best performing stock in the index, BNP Paribas, started coverage on the power producing company. They have an outperform rating at a street high price of $231. The S&P 500 finished last week.
What's going on in the Middle East there.
When people displaced from elsewhere in Lebanon was hit. The attack happened in the Christian majority village of Aitu. While parts of northern Lebanon have been hit by Israeli strikes since the conflict with Hezbollah escalated, it's the first time Aitu has been struck. Let's bring in Ali Hashem in Beirut for more on this. What do we know happened in this small village?
Well, there was this building, 2 stories with more than 25 people coming from the southern town of Haidarun, which is on the border with Israel. And today, there was an airstrike by Israeli warplanes on this building. At least 18 people are killed, several children among the killed. And also, it's, of course, the first time, as you've been saying, that a town, this town, Aitu, is being hit. It's in the GETTR district in North Lebanon. However, we were not talking anymore about the distances because there's no more distances for Israeli warplanes. They're hitting everywhere in Lebanon, whether it's in the Bekaa or in the north or in the south or in Beirut. So this just reminds us of the last attack in the capital, Beirut, just close to downtown, where around 22 people were killed. And most of these people were also internally displaced from their villages from South Lebanon. So they're following the displaced. And it's like giving a message to everyone that nowhere is safe in Lebanon.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, the significance of this attack happening in this particular area of northern Lebanon, because the focus until now had been on the south, but it seems now Israel expanding its war. What does it suggest about the way it's going to be waging this conflict in Lebanon?
Well, given what's been said over the past 24 hours, it seems that Israel is preparing for a new wave of airstrikes. This is now obvious, at least with what we saw in Aitu, what is happening in Bekaa, and in other areas. Airstrikes have been going on. At least the past few days, there were no airstrikes in Beirut or in its southern suburbs, but everyone is anticipating something like this at any time. Just the last hour, the drones above us were very close to the extent that you feel it's like a motorcycle passing in the street. And everyone is feeling this, that these drones are preparing or gathering for what might come. However, it could happen and it couldn't happen. But after yesterday's attack by Hezbollah on the Israeli military in the south of Haifa, today there were a lot of threats from the Israeli side that they will make Lebanon pay for this. But again, this is a war. So part of this war, part of the context of the war is what's happening.
Ali, thank you for that. As you say, a lot of fear about what might happen next in U.S.
My gut feeling is that they are just going to continue bombardment and keep on pushing the Lebanese people north and try to create this buffer zone and engage Hezbollah if they stay south of Litani River, and they're just going to go at it. Now, I think a large ground invasion is going to happen after Sukkot. Sukkot, I believe, starts Tuesday night and ends on the 23rd or 24th. So I would not be surprised that some sort of ground invasion takes place after Sukkot.
These Israeli evacuation orders, let's call them what they are, they're effectively a kill zone. Israel says that if you're in this area after an evacuation order is given, you are a fair target. However, under international law, Israel has a responsibility to civilians left behind. Now, here in Brighteon, the people I've seen that are left behind, a handful of them, are amongst the most vulnerable. These are people who cannot afford to either get a hotel in Beirut or somewhere else like that, or they can't get government shelter. Now, as all of that is going on, Israeli airstrikes still continue around where I am. That's the border over there with Israel. Just in the distance, in the distance is Metula. That's an Israeli town that has been evacuated of people since October the 8th of 2023. Airstrikes keep coming in around this area and all the way down to Eit al-Sham and in Sheba Farms and into Cottrell. That area that I just showed you is very, very key. That was on when on September 29th Israel announced its ground invasion. It was the real focal point for Israel to try and get Israeli troops in.
And in eastern Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, a playground was hit by Israeli strikes. Assad Beg has more on that from Doris.
This is a scene of an Israeli strike that just happened. We weren't too far away. We heard 2 missiles coming in and 2 loud explosions and saw the smoke rising, and this is the result of it. I can see the destroyed buildings, I can see the damage around it, and what's interesting is opposite to where it's been hit is a children's playground. The rubble has gone into that playground, destroyed that playground, and you can see the smoke is still rising, and there's still some fires on the outskirts, on the edges of where this strike took place. Now, this is in the middle of a residential area. We've seen families coming out, and people are being told not to film. People are worried. Assad Beg, Al Jazeera, Doris, Bekaa.
Across the border in Israel, at least one person has been wounded in the town of Carmiel in the north of Israel after a rocket barrage was launched from southern Lebanon. The strike set fire to a car. Hezbollah has increased the numbers of rockets and missiles it's fired towards Israel since the end of last month in response to Israel launching a massive air campaign against Lebanon. Let's bring in Noor O'Day for more on this. Noor is in Amman, Jordan, because Israel's government has banned Al Jazeera from reporting from Israel and the occupied West Bank. So more rocket attacks into Israel today. Tell us first about the situation, Noor, in Carmel.
Well, Foley, the Israeli army says up to 90 projectiles, as they described them in the statement, were launched at Israel from Lebanon since the morning hours. And that includes Carmiel, where we saw images of a car catching fire. It's not clear yet whether it was directly hit by the rocket launched from Lebanon, from Hezbollah presumably, or by shrapnel from interceptions from Israel's defense systems, air defense systems. But we also saw a statement from the Israeli army talking about 2 drones coming from Syrian territory. Those were intercepted with no impact recorded anywhere in northern Israel. But that is basically an indication of just the mood and how the situation is in Israel. Every day, as the temperature rises, as those tensions increase and there's no horizon for an end in the fighting, you see rockets being launched from Lebanon deeper into Israeli territory, covering a much larger area in Israel.
And yes, we saw a brazen drone attack on a military base near Haifa. You wonder how Israelis feel about this. What is their reaction to this, or these increased rocket attacks coming from Lebanon, especially at a time when their government has been telling them that the different conflicts and wars they're engaged in is meant to make them feel safe?
That's really the problem that the Israeli government has right now, to try and convince the public and the skeptical journalists, for that matter, that their claims about degrading Hezbollah capabilities, that they took out about 70% of Hezbollah's rockets and missiles, is in fact actual or factual, when the reality that Israelis are experiencing in Israel is absolutely to the contrary. We've seen a lot of commentary about that in the Israeli press, but we've also seen Israeli military officials, including the Minister of Defense, hold their grounds, consoling the Golani brigade that came under attack, saying that they've done a good job in the war so far. Remember, this is the same brigade that participated in the ground invasion of Gaza and was accused of so many of the atrocities that were, taken to the International Court of Justice about Gaza. So he was praising them, telling them this was a very difficult attack, but they should press on because there's still a lot of work ahead in southern Lebanon.
No, thank you very much for the update. That's no day live there in Amman, Jordan. Elsewhere in northern Gaza, at least 10 Palestinians have been killed in an Israeli strike on an UNRWA aid distribution center in the Jabalia refugee camp. The injured were taken to the nearby Kamal Adwan hospital. The Israeli army launched a major ground invasion in northern Gaza 10 days ago and has blocked food, water, and medical supplies from entering. More than 300 people have been killed during the siege. Back to Tariq Abazum, who's in Deir Balah, central Gaza. So another attack on an UNRWA facility. Talk to us about what happened.
It was a very deadly strike that was carried out earlier today on one of the main and key evacuation centers run by the United Nations in Al-Zarat refugee camp. According to medical sources, as far as we know fully, that 22 Palestinians were killed in that strike, where the destruction there is quite extensive in that school, which really brings more insights about what was going on in Al-Zarat in the past few weeks, where there has been a clear focus on targeting United Nations-run shelters. And we clearly understand that based on UN reports that more than 500 Palestinians have been killed inside the UN-run facilities since the beginning of the conflict on the ground, while more than 1,000 Palestinians also were wounded, and now they are getting treatment in Gaza's barely functional hospitals.
Fox
in order
News.
just to illustrate more fully, it's not only that evacuation center was hit, also evacuation.
Fox News is talking about sending an anti-missile defense system to Israel.
Congressman from Massachusetts, Jake Auchincloss. Congressman, welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
So the U.S. is sending this THAAD missile system to Israel. Major General Pat Ryder at the Pentagon saying about it, quote, "This action underscores the United States ironclad commitment to the defense of Israel and to defend Americans in Israel from any further ballistic missile attacks by Iran. It is part of the broader adjustments the U.S. military has made in recent months to support the defense of Israel and protect Americans from attacks by Iran and Iranian-aligned militias." What is your reaction to this significant news?
I think it says three things. One, it's another example of the really unprecedented military alliance between the United States and Israel. We're not going to let our ally fight alone in the Middle East while it's encircled by a ring of fire. Number two, this complements the tighter sanctions that President Biden has recently announced on Iranian oil exports. We want to hit Iran both defensively and in terms of its ability to respond against any Israeli attacks, but also economically. And then finally, and potentially most importantly, Mike, it's another opportunity for Prime Minister Netanyahu to articulate and then execute a strategy that makes Israel safer and makes the Middle East more peaceful in the long run. That is to say, get the hostages home from Gaza and marginalize Hamas by having Palestinian-led reconstruction in Gaza, helping the Lebanese army clear out Hezbollah and create a buffer zone in the north, and then marginalize Iran's hardliners and uplift its moderate middle class while wedging it from China. These are the imperatives strategically that need to be paired with Israel's recent tactical successes.
Let me ask you a question. I guess some folks on the couch may be asking right now. Do you worry about this dragging the U.S. into a broader conflict in the Middle East?
Whenever there are U.S. troops in the Middle East, I'm always concerned. As an American, as a former Marine officer who knows how dangerous that neighborhood is, the United States needs to maintain a military and security umbrella in the Middle East because it's a volatile and violent region, and we have interests and allies there. We have deployed our aircraft carrier strike groups to the Eastern Mediterranean. We have U.S. troops in Syria and Iraq. And yes, we're going to position U.S. Anti-missile batteries and U.S. troops in Israel when necessary to defend our ally. But certainly no one is looking for another regional conflagration like George W. Bush started in 2003. We want the Abraham Accords to be strengthened and expanded so that we have an insurance policy in the Middle East against further war and can fully pivot to the Indo-Pacific, where our near peer, China, is really the pacing adversary of the 21st century.
All right. I'd like to ask you about one issue here at home. Speaker Mike Johnson talked today about FEMA and its response to the hurricanes. Let's play.
FEMA was slow to respond. They did not do the job that we all expect and hope that they will do. They have tens of billions of dollars that were already sent to FEMA one day before the meeting made landfall. So they have plenty of resources.
Congressman, I know you represent Massachusetts and not North Carolina, but in your view, was FEMA slow, and do they have the funding they need right now?
I think FEMA's responded vigorously. Of course, there should be an after action, as there always is with these disasters, to see what can be improved upon. And I want to hear from the elected officials of both parties in the affected states to understand from their perspective and their constituents' perspectives what happened and what we can do better. In terms of the funding streams, I think what Speaker Johnson needs to acknowledge is there's really two critical funding streams for disaster response. One is FEMA, of course, which helps to rescue and then repair. The other, though, is the Small Business Administration, which helps people get back on their feet after a disaster. And in fact, sometimes the largest source of federal funds for individuals is through SBA, not through FEMA. Now, SBA has said that they are rapidly exhausting their monies. And so the speaker needs to either, one, say that he doesn't agree with their assessment and explain why. Two, say that it doesn't matter that SBA is low on funds and explain why. Or three, reconvene Congress and help us appropriate more funds for the SBA. But he hasn't done any of those three things.
Okay, Congressman Jake Auchincloss, we will follow it. Thanks for your time today.
Good to be with you.
All right. France 24 is doing something here on China, and I don't want to miss it. Okay, they're talking about the Middle East, but they're also talking about, this was their live feed, and I missed. China. Okay, here we go. Okay. Before we do that, I want to play the live feed from France 24, but I had to roll it back a little bit because they're talking about the China incident that I was talking about earlier in the video. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics that I have. I have two different types. I have the VeggieCap version, and I have also the powdered. I usually use the powder. It has a little scooper. Mix it with food or with water. You know, really easy to take. Or you can just take the VeggieCap form. This is really good if you're, you know, taking it at work or if you're on a trip or whatever. But the thing is that taking a good probiotic is really important. It helps you to absorb nutrients better. It'll lower that inflammatory problem that most Americans have with their gut. And it will improve your metabolism. The communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain is really important and needs to be maintained by having a good gut biome. And with a good gut biome, you're going to maintain that mucosal lining in your gut. And by doing that, you're reducing the chances of leaky gut syndrome, and you are going to have more IgAs. It's a different type. It's a type of antibody, but IgAs are in your gut lining, in that mucosal barrier, right, with the gut biome. And so you have like a bacterial layer, and you have these IgAs, and you'll be able to fight infection better, and you're going to have your inner lining will be less stressed and have less inflammation. So when you have a good barrier, a good gut biome barrier, and you have adequate IgAs, this type of antibody, then what's going to happen is you're going to have a healthier gut. And by having a healthier gut, you're reducing leaky gut syndrome, you're reducing chances of having some sort of genomic instability within the crypt of your gut. And if you maintain good cellular health, you're reducing your chances of having polyps. So this is important because having good health, gut biome, reduces the chances of cancers, right? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic either in the VeggieCap form or in the powdered form. They're very high quality. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I've partnered up with Rainbow Herbals and we've created these deodorants. You can get it in citrus or in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. These deodorants are for males and females and they're made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Very high quality ingredients. It's a very high quality deodorant bar. In addition, for being in a deodorant bar, it'll also help to detoxify your body. So it's a dual purpose product. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get a couple bars for your household, and take this deodorant, use it every day to help to detoxify your body and to use it as a deodorant. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, so I want to play this France 24 segment on China.
Of concerns on the other side of the globe. China sending fighter jets and warships around Taiwan. Beijing saying these drills are aimed at giving a stern warning to what it's described as separatist forces on the self-ruled island. These are the second largest scale drills by China in the waters surrounding Taiwan in the last 5 months. Taipei condemning the incursion, saying the international community will not accept China's actions. Joining me in the studio is our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, these are the second largest large-scale war drills that we've seen staged by Beijing in and around Taiwan in the last 5 months. What has provoked the latest round?
The same thing that provoked the last round, Annette, and that is what China sees as the pig-headedness, the stubbornness, the confrontational, quote, separatist stance of Taiwan's president, who made clear and has made clear that he is not going to simply stand by and acquiesce stupidly and smile as China exerts what a lot of observers have called it an anaconda squeeze, a strategy of literally slowly choking Taiwan through these exercises, through massive shows of both naval and air force, and coming closer to the island and throwing massive military hardware at it while not coming right up to the coast. What has he been saying? He's basically been saying that Taiwan and China, remember China is the mainland and Taiwan is a democratically elected, self-governing island, has its own army, it has its own currency, it has its own government. And what it has essentially been doing is its leader said, we are not subordinate to China, nor is China subordinate to us. He has also said that we are going to resist annexation, which, as he sees it, is China's absolute clear strategy, not his opinion, but the explicit strategy of China, which sees Taiwan as sort of an inherent birthright. Taiwan is China's, China.
Now, do you understand why I was concerned in 2020 about this ramp up that's taking place in Asia? America is over indebted. It has a depleted Navy. There's war in Europe and in the Middle East. The United States is in World War III. And we're run by a bunch of, we're literally run by a bunch of idiots.
Taiwan, at some point, it is made clear it is ready to reclaim what it sees as rightfully it, to reunify it by force if necessary. Because the president has vocally stood in the way of China being allowed to do that, being able to go about this forced reunification, he has been vilified and demonized by the mainland, and he is right now seen as a dangerous influence, a separatist activist who is promoting dangerous independent forces on Taiwan.
And the Taiwanese president as well, what he sees as China's growing authoritarianism. Some China watchers see a parallel, if you like, between what is happening with Russia and...
But in New York, the S&P 500 is at 5,853.
Yeah, you don't need too big a looking glass to see that parallel, Annette, because basically, if you look at, obviously, it's a different context, it's a different country. Xi Jinping is not Vladimir Putin. Obviously, they're different leaders, but their logic is the same in the sense that a lot of people say, Russia sees Ukraine as its historical sort of birthright. Ukraine, as Putin has said to U.S. leaders in the past, Ukraine is Russia, Russia is Ukraine. They're no different. It's not, he doesn't see it as a sovereign, independent country. In the same way, China does not see Taiwan as having its own sovereign, national, self-sustaining identity. It sees it as part of China. China, let's not forget, it was colonized, by the Chinese for a long time, but actually when it came to existence in 1912, it was colonized by the Japanese. The Taiwanese themselves see themselves as obviously sharing a lot of culture, a lot of history with China. Not all of it great, but at the same time, they do see themselves as having a unique identity. This is where the Ukraine parallel comes into being. Vladimir Putin moving against Ukraine because he believes it's within his rights historically, even if the West doesn't get it. And by the same token, Xi Jinping sees Taiwan as historically, rightfully, if not juridically, his. And at some point, we're waiting with bated breath. The expectation is that he is just playing the clock. He will at some point do a Putin and move against it. China's so far been less interventionist. It's been more standoffish in these matters, perhaps than Russia, which has had a very aggressive posture on the international stage. But a lot of people say, don't be fooled. Xi Jinping knows what he wants, and at some point, he's going to get it. It's just a matter of time.
Thank you for that. In other news, a minute's silence has been held in French schools this Monday. Teachers and students pausing for a moment of reflection in memory of Dominic
We're going
Bernard.
to go to Al Jazeera on this topic.
Is being hosted again by Pakistan. Kamal Haider, Al Jazeera, Islamabad.
Now to South Sudan, where more than 1.6 million children under the age of 5 are at risk of malnutrition.
All right, this is CNN about the defense system being sent.
Official tells CNN that about the United States sending U.S. troops to Israel. A U.S. defense official tells CNN that about 100 troops are deploying there to operate one of the United States' most advanced missile defense systems. Pentagon's announcement comes as Israel faces unprecedented attacks from Iran.
I don't know a whole lot about this missile defense system, but this is my take on it, all right? I suspect that Iran's attack damaged part of the Iron Dome's radar system. And they're going to upgrade this. And this system that they're putting in is a test. They're testing a new system. Now, it'll probably stay there in Israel if it works out. But this is an upgrade to the Iron Dome. And this is like cutting edge. That's my gut feeling. And they're testing. They're testing this. Because if this works, then they're probably going to need these batteries of defense systems all around the bases in the Middle East for the U.S., especially in Iraq. They probably need these missile defense systems for Saudi Arabia for the oil fields.
What we're seeing is a massive increase in the number of missiles and drones that Hezbollah is firing into Israel. The first 10 months of this war, they were firing anywhere from 30 to 50 per day. Over the last 3 days, they fired somewhere around 300 per day. This is the best system in the world, and there's only 6 of them, 6 batteries of these in the United States inventory. So loaning one and deploying a group of soldiers to Israel is a pretty big deal.
Just yesterday, a Hezbollah drone entering into Israel's airspace without triggering an alert killed 4 soldiers, injured more than 60 people. The attack was one of the bloodiest against Israel since the war began over a year ago. Joining us now with more, CNN Global Affairs analyst Kim Dozier. Kim, good morning. Always grateful to have you. So help us understand what this system adds to the defenses that the Israelis already have, and how concerned potentially Americans should be about U.S. troops deploying there.
It adds another layer of air defense in that what it does is it knocks ballistic missiles, mid-range and long-range, out of the sky. With Iran in its last volley of missiles it fired at Israel, it switched up to mostly ballistic missiles. This will counteract that or help counteract that. So it's a look ahead to what might happen after Israel does some sort of retaliation against Iran's last volley of ballistic missiles. But it does put
roughly 95 to 100 troops on the ground in Israel, which the U.S. hasn't done before. And it's also a signal to people in the Middle East and really throughout the world that while Israel is stepping up its attacks in Lebanon, in Gaza, that the U.S. is making statements about that, but then acting by sending this missile defense system. It's tacit approval of everything Israel's doing. At least that's how it will be seen by many in the Arab world.
So you see this as, I mean, it does seem to be a distinction between this is something that is designed to defend Israel from attacks, right? As opposed to, I mean, one of the major criticisms certainly the left has for politicians here is providing the bombs that are falling on Gaza. How does the Biden administration separate these two things, if at all?
Well, the important thing is that what it does is by protecting Israel, the U.S. is hoping to keep Israel from stepping up to the next kind of response. By sending this now, before Israel has responded to Iran's last volley of ballistic missiles, it's saying, we will be here to protect you. You don't have to do as big a strike as you may be planning on Iraq.
Iron Dome is damaged and they need an upgrade. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. And Israel's going to strike Iran. And they don't really care about what the United States has to say. And it's in the United States' interest to strike Iran. Want to hear the cold, hard truth here? You want to hear the whole cold, hard truth? The cold, hard truth is that the petrodollar is dying. And that the whole BRICS nations are galvanizing itself in the international community to weaken the hegemonic power of the United States because we managed that hegemonic power poorly since the fall of the Berlin Wall. All right? So the United States is at fault here. But with world war, as long as the United States reigns supreme, it will be able to maintain that dollar. So war is going to happen. You have to break up the BRICS through war to maintain the bond market, to maintain the financial supremacy. Because the United States is the first risk-free rate. If the United States loses its status as a risk-free rate, then it's game over. So war has to happen for the United States to be a hegemonic superpower. That's the cold, hard facts.
Missile sites, because we're going to provide another way to protect your population from this.
Really interesting. All right, Kim Dozier for us this morning. Kim, thank you very much for being here.
All right, so that's...
Whoa!
So that's... I'm gonna shift. All right, I know Tom Nicholas. He used to be a professor over at Harvard. I actually was
pressure to keep campaigning.
I was at his kind of ceremonial retirement dinner. All right, it was an alumni dinner, and so I was in the room. He's a very good teacher and he's very knowledgeable. But the thing is, he is anti-Trump. All right, he's part of that whole national security state intelligentsia apparatus that is Orange Man bad. So, which I think he's wrong on. But he's a good teacher. He's a good professor. Right? But let's play this because I think it's going to be fun.
He now endorsed Vice President Harris. In his latest piece for the magazine, Tom Nichols tells readers, and now shares with Harry Srinivasan, why he believes re-electing Donald Trump would be founding father George Washington's worst nightmare.
Christian, thanks. Tom Nichols, thanks so much for joining us. Your most recent column, the cover story from The Atlantic, is titled Washington's Nightmare. Donald Trump is the tyrant, the first president feared. Why this article? Why now? Why is it important to take us back in history?
Well, the answer to why now is because we're in a hotly contested, essentially tied election where
Donald Trump is trying to return to office with a very clear agenda to become an autocrat, to subvert the Constitution, to undermine American freedoms, to stain the presidency even worse than he did the first time around. And I think we thought it was important when we were putting this piece together to remind people that all presidents, even the worst presidents before Trump, still had this kind of benchmark of George Washington, a man of integrity, not a saint, man with a lot of personal flaws, but nonetheless someone who set the standard for presidential behavior. And even when they violated, that kind of behavior, I think that other presidents at least tried to pay lip service to it or understood that they were walking in Washington's footsteps. Trump seems both unaware of that and really doesn't care about anything related to the office other than how much power and security it can bring to him. And so I thought it was time to say that and to remind people that we don't have to be this way. We do have a better heritage and a better history to draw on.
There are so many people that like to sort of point back to the founding fathers, originalists, constitutionalists that say, well, this is the template that these individuals had set out for us. And what your article really shows is really the path in a way that Washington forged and the benchmark that he set for presidential behavior overall.
Right. And, I think you get hung up sometimes on the idea that the founders didn't believe that anything should ever change, that because it was done, things were done a certain way or certain laws were passed that nothing could ever change. Washington, for one, believed that the American people had every right to change their constitution as long as they did it peacefully and through democratic means. But what Washington really reminds us is that he felt that the presidency should be occupied by a person of decency and virtue and patriotism, someone who was able to put the country ahead of himself. And Washington did that. Washington, interestingly enough, was always trying to leave the presidency. Even though he was a man of great ambition, he was always deeply concerned that he would fail, that he would somehow not be able to live up to what the country needed from him. And I think that, again, that's a useful reminder because those are eternal things. Those are not particular amendments to the Constitution or particular laws or particular doctrines from the 18th or 19th century. A basic sense of the...
But Professor Nichols doesn't mention that it is very obvious that the civil liberties, all right, that are enshrined in the Constitution are inalienable. They are not given by man, but by our Creator. That means that there are certain parts of the Constitution that don't change. He doesn't tell you that.
President should be a person of integrity, decency, empathy, rectitude, civic virtue. Somebody who cares about the country.
And you said that
Does that sound like Joe Biden? Of course not. Joe Biden's on the take. His family's been on the take. Do you think that he has really a lot of family virtue with the diary of his daughter and the issues with Hunter Biden? Yeah, family of virtue.
Washington's most important quality, you kind of break the article down in that way, his refusal to use great power for his own ends, his extraordinary self-command, and most of all, his understanding that national leaders in a democracy are only temporary stewards of a cause far greater than themselves. You kind of juxtapose throughout the article each of these characteristics by diving into the history of Washington, but also comparing it and contrasting it to the behavior of the former president.
Well, that last one is really important, Hari, that notion of being a guardian or a steward of institutions and of democracy. That's what allowed Washington to walk away.
What happens when the national security state and the intelligentsia have this thought that this person that is elected, let's say Donald Trump, by the Electoral College and the will of the people, they feel, because of their eggheadedness, that the people are wrong and that it has to be curtailed, that the executive branch has to be curtailed, or certain things have to be, stories need to be created to hamper his presidency, aka, the dossier that was a total fraud. If you are thinking that the national security state was on board with what the president wanted to do, right? You're not paying attention. They tried to circumvent his presidency. They tried to circumvent his candidacy in 2016, his presidency in 2017 all the way to 2020. Now, I think the way he managed the end of his term, especially during the whole election cycle, is problematic for him for certain voters to be reelected. But he might be reelected. But to say that the national security state is not going after and trying to prevent his candidacy, or is not trying to prevent him from being a effective president, I don't think you're paying attention, because I think the national security state has been doing that. They did it during the first candidacy of Trump with these fake dossiers, and there was election interference with that, and then the never-ending impeachments that fell to the wayside. It was a big waste of time, but it was, quote, effective because it hampered his presidency. Can you imagine what President Trump could have done if it wasn't for the national security state and the intelligentsia, the East, the New England intelligentsia, if they just got out of the way and just let him run the executive branch, which is what the people wanted through them voting him into office, all right? But what it is the national security state and the administrative apparatus that is coming out of Washington doesn't like that, because they want to be in control. They want someone in the executive branch that will take their advice and move the agenda forward. And so the presidency is just a figurehead. But the reality of the situation is our Constitution endows the executive branch to have certain powers that are checked by the legislative and by the judicial branch. So the chances of Trump just being a dictator is like super, like almost zero chance, all right? Because we have balance of, we have that whole idea of checks and balances and the balance of powers within these different branches of government. But you have you have this intelligentsia and this national security state that is gaining more and more control of the legislative and the executive branch, especially the executive branch is a problem. And so if someone is coming in that is antithetical to the national security state, or is antithetical to the administrative state, then that apparatus, the deep state, that apparatus will go after them and demonize them and make, falsehoods and all this stuff. So now, does Trump have an aura of Washington? A little bit. I think Trump's aura, though, is stronger to JFK, because JFK also noticed that the national security state was getting out of control. This is a problem that George Washington did not have. Now, with George Washington's personality, if he saw someone as a traitor, he felt that one would have to go after that traitor and make an example of that traitor so others would not do the same thing. others would not follow the path of trade. All right. But Washington didn't have to deal with the national security state. Washington didn't have to deal with this like embedded administrative issue that you have professional government officials, and I don't think that's a good thing, that could lose power. All right. And what I mean by not a good thing, I don't think that we should have professional politicians and administrative officials. But they're worried that they will lose power if they have someone that comes in that is antithetical to their wants and needs. Because the national security state's wants and needs may not necessarily be in line with the American people. And so what happens is that you have the administrative state that thinks they know better than the people. And so therefore they create stories to try to control the executive branch. And in some cases try to assassinate or try to impeach or try to demonize during the campaign to confuse voters to vote for a different person, maybe even the other party, that is a little bit more in line with the national security state's wants and needs. That's the bigger issue. And so when Trump says that there are enemies within, there are enemies within. That's the national security state, and that's the administrative state. They are moving the country into a direction where they want to take away power from the executive branch. Trump is not a dictator. Now, someone needs to come in and actually truncate the national security state. It's out of control. It was out of control before 9/11, and it became really out of control after 9/11. Now, unfortunately, Tom Nichols is part of that intelligentsia. Now, he's still a good professor. He has, you can learn a lot from him and all this stuff. But the problem is there's too many administrative officials and ones that have tentacles within the national security state that is orange man bad syndrome. I don't think that's healthy for the country, especially in light of knowing that there were fake dossiers by the Clinton campaign to demonize Trump that elevated to the FBI and, 2.5 years of investigation to try to demonize him. And what they try to do is try to chip away at the Republican Party and chip away at his presidency. So I disagree. I disagree with Tom on this. Professor Nichols. The problem is that the national security state feels as though it's their right and obligation to try to inhibit the Trump presidency or candidacy, and not understanding that it's the will of the people. There's the wisdom of the will of the people, that our founding fathers believed that the wisdom of the people had a better pulse of where the country should be going than the national security state.
From power multiple times, even when it was basically offered to him on a platter. In 1783, the Army wanted him to lead them to Philadelphia to overthrow Congress because they were fed up with not getting paid. And just to show you how far back this idea goes, they were convinced that democracy doesn't work. And Washington crushed that. He absolutely refused to do it and shamed them. When it came time for him to leave the Army, he did the unthinkable. He went and handed in his military commission and said, I want to go back to being a civilian, when they would have left him in uniform forever. And of course, He didn't want to serve 2 terms. They talked him into it. Jefferson and Hamilton talked him into it especially. But when it came time for him to leave, he would not stay. He could have stayed till he died. And he basically said, I'm going home. Trump, by contrast, thinks of all these things as things that belong to him. He thinks of all these institutions, the Army, the White House, the presidency, everything in it, all the boxes of his document.
Franklin Roosevelt felt like he should be in the presidency forever. What it is that many presidents have a God complex, all right? And those individuals that have God complexes have a tendency to feel as though that the rules don't apply to them and that they, could or should, elevate to some sort of, be some sort of godhead for a country. The thing is that our founding fathers understood the characteristics of mankind, and especially of megalomaniacs, all right? That's why we have balance of powers. It's not going to happen, Tom. It's not going to happen because the Supreme Court, because the legislature, that's not going to happen. You're not going to have some sort of dictator. And what you do have are individuals that are not voted in by the will of the people, that have become ingrained into the system and embedded in a national security state, that are working under the radar, moving this country in a direction that is probably antithetical to the direction that the people want to go to. And that we need a president that actually says this national security state is part of the executive branch, and that these agencies, these divisions, need to run more effectively so we have a balanced budget. So that means that they have to lay people off. And the footprint of the national security state and the administrative state needs to go down. That way we're saving money, we're more efficient. You look at corporations, they have to purge and they have to add in tech to improve processes and all that. That's not happening in mass in government. So we have to improve processes, cut the headcount, streamline operations, not add bureaucracy. And what happens is that we'll have a more efficient and more vibrant economy. But what we have here is a national security state that they literally feel as though if someone goes again, if every time, this happens every time a president comes in or a candidate comes in that is against the national security state, they'll find a way to either get rid of that candidate, or if that candidate does happen to elevate to the presidency, that candidate, or that president is curtailed. Now, Trump made a big mistake. He hired the wrong people. And they're in that cabinet and with his advisors, they had more alignment with the national security state than the actual the will of the people and the will of the president. And that should not happen. That should not happen. We have a problem with the national security state and the overbloatedness of our government. And we need a person like Trump to cut it. Now, unfortunately, I think Trump is not going to cut enough. I mean, the FBI and the CIA and all these other, 3-letter agencies, and 4-letter agencies and 5-letter agencies and all these things, they could easily cut 25% of their staff. Easily. The government's too expensive to run. And you have where the government is going after its people, going after the people, and eroding the Fourth Amendment. This is a big problem. All right? The national security state, who's watching the watcher? All right? So the problem isn't some sort of dictator coming from the executive branch. The problem is it's some sort of dictating cabal coming out of the national security state.
the furniture, the rug, you name it. He thinks that this is just another corporate acquisition for him, and that these are his toys that he can own and use at will. And it couldn't be more different from Washington's notion that these are important institutions that will outlive him and that belong to the people of the United States of America.
One of the things in the article that leapt out at me was something that John Kelly said at an event in Mount Vernon about George Washington. He said that one of the most important things that we should remember about George Washington is that he went home. You go on to write, people who are mad for power are a mortal threat to democracy. They may hold different titles. At the heart, they are tyrants. Explain.
The whole point of a democracy is that you have to be...
Let's dive into that. People who are mad for power are a mortal threat to democracy. Hillary Clinton. They may hold different titles, but at heart, they are tyrants. Adam Schiff. Nancy Pelosi. Schumer. You have people within the administrative state and the national security state making up stuff to demonize and to try to take down a president. I mean, that's a fact. That's a fact. All right. They had different titles. They had different positions within the government. They were literally trying to do a coup on the president, Trump. There was a coup that probably happened with Biden, but with Biden, he's just cognitively gone. So the problem with Tom is that his focus on Trump, because he's orange man bad syndrome. Tom's focus should not be on Trump. Tom's focus should be on the national security state, because that is where the tyranny starts. And it's Trump trying to shine a light on that. But then you have the national security state going, no, the tyrant is Trump. Now, the problem with Trump is the way he says certain things, especially to many outside of New York, take it in his tone and the way he constructs it, puts a negative spin on what Trump is really saying. Trump is not a dictator. But what he also is noticing is that the national security state was dragging their feet and not doing what he wanted and what he's empowered to do in the executive branch as president of the United States. If one would say that the national security state wasn't dragging their feet during Trump's administration, you're not paying attention. Because they were dragging their feet. They were trying to prevent Trump from being president and implementing his policies. The problem was that Trump put a lot of advisors around him that he shouldn't put in. And he even admits to it. He hired the wrong people. Now, the administrative state spins that. It's like, well, now we're losing control of Trump. If Trump gets in, he's a little bit more wise about how to set things up. The administrative state needs to be truncated, like by a lot, by like probably 50%. The national security state, the administrative state has ballooned out. America can't afford it. And not only that, it caused more harm than good. So the tyranny isn't Trump. The tyranny is the national security state.
To share and exercise power in the name of your fellow citizens, and to relinquish that power when the Constitution and the law and elections require you to do that. The notion that power is yours to keep forever is fundamentally an undemocratic notion. These institutions don't belong.
And Trump did step down. See, they're making it sound like he didn't step down. He did step down. There was a peaceful transition of power. He did step down. He didn't. It wasn't as if he didn't step down. He didn't prolong it beyond, the actual inauguration date. Of course not. He did step down. Now, he still feels as though, there were improprieties that were going on. But the problem isn't Trump. The problem is the national security state.
The offices don't belong to you. You are there as a servant of the people. That's why we call it public service. You're there as a servant of the people of the United States. And Kelly,
then why did the FBI perpetuate the dossier? Why did Congress try to chip away at his presidency? And even Lindsey Graham was, at the very beginning was a part of it. And then he switched. He, quote, realized that it was, all fake. The reality of the situation is the national security state demonizes people to try to either control them or prevent them from elevating in office or preventing them from executing their office responsibilities. But the problem is everything he's saying I agree with if you applied it to the national security state. Orange man bad syndrome. It's so obvious that it's like it's not the problem of Trump. The problem is the national security state doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. Did the FBI perpetuate a lie? Yes. Was there never-ending lawfare on a former president? Yes. Is there equal fervor with going after a president or a former president? No, it's only on Trump. Why not on Biden? Oh, he's too old. Ridiculous. And this is where Professor Professor Nichols gets it wrong. He's right, but he's applying it to the wrong person. It's the national security state. That's the problem. They're out of control. They think that they're above the law. What about the CIA directors lying to Congress about collecting data on American citizens illegally? And then once it was found out that he did this and that he lied to Congress, Congress didn't do anything about it. Problem. So Trump must be bad. Orange man bad. But bald-headed CIA agent is not.
Now, not only that Washington went home, but he did it twice. As I said earlier, he gave up his military commission. Especially in the 18th century, people just didn't do that. You didn't just say, okay, I'm tired of being a general here. I'm going to go back to my farm. That's really essential to the democratic spirit. This notion you trust your fellow citizens so that when you're done doing your time serving your country, you hand out.
That includes the ones that are in the administrative state. You're supposed to trust the American people. But what happens is that they don't trust the American people and they're doing surveillance and they're trying to, entrap them and get them to do things that will demonize certain groups. January 6th was an entrapment, and there was a herd effect that was going on. And who were the sheepdogs, right? Doing the herd. We need to have a longer conversation, Tom, about that. Because the problem isn't Trump. The problem is the national security state that doesn't believe in the will of the people. The national security state wants to rewrite the Constitution so they have more power and weaken the executive branch. They want to weaken what our founding fathers wanted to do, Tom.
You hand that power, you hand those institutions to other people who will then exercise them and hopefully with the same virtue and diligence that you did.
Tom, I sometimes wonder whether the conversation we're having about kind of almost political philosophy and idea and sort of principle is somewhere flying
at a different altitude than where people are about the decisions that they make. I mean, what explains, if we had some shared civic understanding of what this democracy was, what explains the fealty to Donald Trump over these other ideals?
You know, it's a sad thing, right? Because we used to have this shared understanding. It wasn't a matter of education, and it wasn't a matter of, being well-read or having college degrees. We all understood the basics of people, the basic history that was given to us by people like George Washington, James Madison, Abraham Lincoln, and others. That's still out there, and it's still being taught. But when people are resentful, when they become drawn inward and they're constantly convinced, not just by Donald Trump, but by this stream of right-wing media pounding messages of grievances, you become kind of narcissistic and you can only look inward. And all of these other concepts, service, duty, honor, honesty, just get crowded out as noise. And all you can hear is yourself and your own anger. And a lot of the Trump voters, I think, and this I think is something that's become clearer over 8 years. 8 years ago, we had a lot of theories about why this happened, but most of them haven't panned out. This really does come down to grievance and resentment being ginned up among a particular group of people who are reasonably well off, who live reasonably comfortable lives, but don't like the fact that the country is changing, that demographically and socially the country has changed in ways they just don't happen to like. And so they crowded all of this out. They don't want to hear it. They know, I guess I would argue, as I've been saying for years, I think somewhere deep down.
So the CIA should be able to do surveillance on its citizens and break the Fourth Amendment. Tom? So the CIA and the national security state should be doing operations for entrapment. Tom? So our government officials should make up stories and try to demonize judicial or proceedings while they are being elevated for confirmation. You don't see that really happening on the Republican side. You see that happening on the Democrat side, aka Kavanaugh, aka, the whole Anita Hill issue. What about Bork? Here's the problem, is that you have individuals that if they go against a certain philosophy, a powerful political group will try to kill them off politically. Now, this seems to happen more often and executed by the Democratic Party than the Republican Party. So we gotta really pay attention here. It's like you have a party that's out of control. Now, what about illegal immigration? Illegal immigration is illegal. And you don't need new laws to stop it. You need new laws to let it happen. Oh, now I get it.
They're wrong, which makes them even more resistant to any discussion because it's very uncomfortable for them. But as I keep saying,
what about the intelligentsia that wants to just keep globalization unfettered? And how it destroys our manufacturing capability, especially when we need more shipyards to make naval vessels so we can fight a war in China. No, I think there are people that have woken up, right? they have woken up and they realize that their national security state is run amok. The Democratic Party is a party of corruption.
But this, because we don't have to live this way. We don't have to be this way. The heritage of Washington and the founders and Lincoln and Roosevelt and others, it's all available to us. We don't need any specialized training to embrace it. It's there and it's always been there for us.
So Tom, in the same vein, how do you explain the appeal and embrace of Donald Trump and Elon Musk? You wrote a separate piece earlier this week that profiled their relationship. You called them, quote, plutocrats masquerading as ordinary Americans.
Part of this resentment and part of this anger and this sort of itching resentment about social change is that a lot of these voters see other people living relatively good lives, and that enrages them. They don't understand it. They think they shouldn't be living good lives. They want them punished. There was a Trump voter years ago who got thrown out of work because of one of Trump's government shutdown threats. And she said, this isn't what I voted for. He's not hurting the people he's supposed to be hurting. And that is very much, once you're voting to hurt people, then you are part of this kind of resentful tribe. And you don't really care about your interests. You don't really care about policy. But
the thing is that it's happening on both sides. You don't think that the Democratic Party is trying to hurt candidates? I mean, look at what happened with Kavanaugh. Just look at, what Clarence Thomas. Look at what has happened with Trump's run for the presidency, all three times. People need to wake up, man. To think that people aren't getting, that this isn't happening on both sides. And it's happening actually more by the Democratic Party than the Republican Party.
People who are rich enough and powerful enough, people like Trump and Musk and Vance, who is a multimillionaire himself, you want to see people go out there and have the ability to hurt people that you think shouldn't be living as well as they are, to hurt people who seem to not be paying attention to you, and to make them pay attention to you.
Now, the thing is the last 20, 30 years, because of globalization, there's been a group of people within the Democratic Party that have really been successful financially because of this, because of globalization. All right? And that, if you want to tax, that may hurt globalization, that may hurt their financial position. See, so it's not about the country. It's about protecting their wealth. It's about protecting themselves. The Democratic Party, right? Let's just listen to Bloomberg all the time. They're against Trump because why? They keep on pushing this idea that he's going to hurt globalization, that it's going to be inflationary because of tariffs and all this stuff. And the reality of the situation is that we need to rebuild our manufacturing base. One, to have prowess for war. And two, that's where innovation comes from, is when you make things, not when you outsource it. Now it gets a little complicated because we run these deficits and someone has to buy our bonds. So what we do is we hurt the little guy in the United States, the one making stuff, and we'll go buy it from some cheap country for that cheap country to buy our bonds. Oh, okay. Let's cut the administrative state down to a manageable size, an efficient size. Not once has he said that maybe the administrative state is bloated out and it needs to be restructured. The Constitution doesn't need to be restructured. The organizational charts for these agencies need to be restructured. And so what happens is that you have these high density areas like New York and California that are mostly Democrat and mostly globalism, where it's actually eroding the manufacturing prowess of this country.
That's, I think, why they're attracted to these plutocratic fake populists, because these guys have the money and the reach to be able to make other people miserable if they really choose to.
And you think that Hollywood, especially the echelon in Hollywood, aren't plutocrats? I mean, come on, Tom, get real. And most of those people in Hollywood, those plutocrats in Hollywood, they vote Democrat. I mean, wake up.
What was it about, say, for example, George Washington, who was incredibly popular, but who wasn't into populism or the wisdom of the crowds?
But, it's a wonderful example of to show that you can be one of the most popular people in the country. Washington ran unopposed. I mean, 2 unanimous victories in the Electoral College. Could have had a third if he really wanted it, and yet was deeply distrustful of popular emotion and made no bones about that. And I think one of the things that distinguished Washington and the early founders, the early presidents, up until you get to maybe the age of Andrew Jackson, who becomes the first, real populist kind of president, was that they all said, look, we are not here to simply amplify the emotions of ordinary people. We're here as to serve the public. We hear you, but that doesn't mean we simply do whatever you want done. That's why the founders built in all these checks and balances. They put a Senate in to slow down legislation. They had a president who had a veto. They understood this role. That
So how are you going to have a dictator coming out of the executive branch, Tom? How is that going to happen? Really? I need to do a commercial here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. This helps with cell metabolism. In addition, it also helps to boost up your energy levels. Vitamin B1 through B5 are very important for the electron transport chain, which produces your ATP, which is your energy source. So please make sure that you get vitamin B complex. This is important to take when you get older. Once you get 40 years old, you should be taking vitamin B complex. Why? You want to protect your neurons. You need B vitamins to protect your neurons. Trust me. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Vitamin C, very important for your immune system. Take it every day. If you have a cold, take a double dose. Drink it with filtered water. And magnesium and zinc, important for your immune system. Take every day. And if you're sick, take a double dose. Drink it with filtered water. Resveratrol, very important to get rid of senescent cells. Why? When cells start to divide, they start to bring down their telomeres, their telomere lengths at the ends of the chromosomes. So once the telomeres get to a certain length, it goes into senescence, which means that the cell stays alive, but it doesn't divide anymore. And over time, what happens is that it collects garbage, right? It collects toxins, and it becomes less functional. So you want to get rid of those, right? And have your tissues that can regenerate to repopulate that tissue with younger cells. Resveratrol helps to get rid of senescent cells. In addition, it's an antioxidant, and it's synergistic with many other things, such as C60, NAD+, ubiquinol. So please go to my store and take resveratrol every day. I take it every day. I've been taking it every day for decades. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this resveratrol. And lastly, omega-3. Omega-3 is very important for your cardiovascular health. How does it work? It brings down LDL levels and increases your HDL levels. That means you have a better lipid profile, and it helps to prevent red blood cells from sticking. That means that you can mitigate overclotting. Please go to my store and take the omega-3. It is synergistic with nattokinase. Now, since we're talking about nattokinase is fibrinolytic. It'll break up clots. That's important since the 2020 crisis. And nattokinase will help with lipid profile. They'll bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. So it's synergistic with omega-3. Please take nattokinase every day if you want to improve your cardiovascular health. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the nattokinase, the other supplements that I've been talking about throughout this video. Let's continue with Professor Nichols.
Direct democracy. This isn't like Athens, where everybody crowds into the public square and yells loudly, and then all of the loudest cheers create policy. That's exactly what the founders didn't want, but that's exactly what people like Trump promise. He goes to rallies and he says, how about if I do this? And the crowd cheers. And he says, see it. I'm a genius. It's a great idea. Something Washington would never have done. And to their credit,
First of all, by doing that at a rally, he's polling and getting sentiment of his voter base. All right, it's like polling. So come on, Tom, get real. And because we have a legislative body and it goes through deliberation, it doesn't matter because it's going to get watered down and spiced up, and it's going to have a lot of pork for the national security state. So get real. You're making these comparisons like it's going to happen in the United States, and it doesn't happen that way. You go to a rally, you throw some red meat to rile up your base, all right, and you're doing a poll. All right, if you have 20,000, 30,000 people there, or even 10,000 people there, doesn't it make sense to go, I'm thinking of this. What do you think? And you get, now, of course, there could be bias because you don't have a random sampling and all this stuff. But the thing is that it's a not only is it a polling tool, but it's also a way for you to do kind of a marketing strategy because it'll be covered by the media and blah, 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 and you get more attention. So it's actually a brilliant idea. But that's not how the sausage is made, Tom. You know this. The way the sausage is made, it goes through deliberation in Congress. Get real. See, this is the thing. This is that you have the intelligentsia, and he's knowledgeable, but the thing is, it's orange man bad syndrome. And he knows where his
would
bread
never have even considered doing that. In fact, they worried about it. They worried about a demagogue who would try to lead the country by doing that kind of an appeal to emotion and to rage and to anger. And they put institutions in place to try to prevent that from happening.
You have taught for...
I would say 60% of the time that Biden is doing a speech, he's angry. Get real.
25 years at the U.S. Naval War College, you taught about Washington. But for this story, you kind of went back and
also taught
researched his life. He pointed out in the article, as many people know, that he wasn't without flaws, that he was a slaveholder, But I also wonder, even kind of knowing that, why have we elevated George Washington to this almost mythical status? When you look at the monuments in Washington alone, you have these beautiful ornate places to Lincoln and Jefferson, and you literally have this Egyptian obelisk. That is the Washington Monument, right? And why is that?
Well, I think part of it is that
I'll tell you why. Because during that time period, all right, you have Napoleon coming in. All right, so George Washington is elevated to the presidency, right? And near the end, we're talking like late, 1700s, all right? During the early 1800s, there was a lot of discovery with Egypt. So at that time, our architecture was blending Greek and Egyptian architecture because of Egyptology, right? That was a big thing in the early 1800s. And then obviously, a new democracy or constitutional republic is, what we really are, and, going back to some of the pillars of the Greeks, right? To show, a strong foundation to try to instill in the populist mindset, that we're building a republic that has a strong foundation, right, for future generations. So you had the column architecture, and then also the discoveries that were happening in Egypt. That's why that's why it happened. It's not some mythical thing. It was just that was the theme of the time when these monuments were being designed and erected. But let's see what Tom says, because I'm willing to bet he doesn't say it.
Something of a Sphinx-like character. It hurt him to talk. We joke about the false teeth. He was always a man who was very careful with his words, but in later life, it actually did hurt him to speak. And so he just listened, was very deliberative, kept his own counsel. But on top of that, I think Americans needed a unifying myth, a unifying, almost godlike figure around whom they could rally. And Washington was a great choice. He had won the war. He had presided over the Constitutional Convention. He was a man of unimpeachable integrity. He was respected by everyone across the board among the early revolutionaries. And I think, as a young nation, we wanted to have a founding.
Kabbalist. I gave you the reason at this level plane. All right. There's a Kabbalistic level too. And that is that we have different levels of understanding within our neshama, our soul. All right, we have different levels of soul, but at the level of neshama, there are 3 different levels. And one level is realizing that there's a creator. There's another level that realizes that the creator is active in the creation, that there's an energy force that's coming down that you may not be able to see, that is feeding the universe. That if that energy source was cut off, all of the universe would die. All right. And then there's the realization with the highest level of the neshama that the creator knows what everyone is thinking, what everyone is doing. So not only was there a creator, but there is this energy source that's coming through. And then the highest level is it knows your thought. Okay, this is a very deep Kabbalistic concept. Now, people's neshama may not, they may reach, some people's neshama don't believe that they're a creator. Right? So they have less less elevation within the different worlds. The neshamas that have creator, but don't think that there is a continuous flow of energy, they usually they realize the world is created, but it is chaotic, and that therefore we need, representatives that have good character to be able to lead us, right? So those neshamas are the ones that gravitate to to a figurehead, all right? When you realize, those neshamas realize that there is this interceding energy force. God bless America. That is the neshama at the second level. The first level is God realizing there's a creator. Bless, America. All right. That neshama of the people that are saying it are realizing there's an energy force that is coming down. But there's a third level, and that is the realization that there is a oneness, that it knows everything that has happened and everything that will happen. everything that is happening. Everything's all one. Just think about it. If you take the time element out and you could see all time right, and you elevate, so you have time and space, right? So you have 4 dimensions. But if you have a 5th dimension where you can see all of time and all of space, right? That is this hypercube of representation of this highest level of neshama. The far majority of the people in the United States are either at the first level. Most people are at the first. There are some people below the first level, but most people are at the first level, but need some sort of representative because their neshama doesn't realize that there is an energy force coming down to provide and intercede. So those people need some sort of God figure, some sort of Godhead, some sort of representative, right? Now, if you have a nefarious person that comes in, and you have a lot of people that have a neshama at the creator level, but need someone to intercede, it's easy to be taken advantage of. But when you have a neshama that is above that, and realizing that the creator does intercede through this energy force, then you no longer need a representative, because the real source of blessing, right, is not the God. It's not some sort of Godhead representative, but the creator itself. And then the highest level of individuals, the ones that are the most wise, they realize that all is, all was, all will be. It's all one. All right. And it takes, that's very few people have that. All right. So in terms of the population of the world, very few people have that true understanding of their neshama. There are a decent number of people that have the understanding with their neshama that there is an energy force that's coming through. But the far majority of the people of the world there was a creator, but not intercedes. And therefore you need a representative. That's a big problem. And so Kabbalistically, this is the reason why Washington ended up becoming this kind of Ubermensch.
Hero. And your point about the obelisk is so well taken, because the few statues of Washington that were done around that time were really bad. I mean, they were modeled on Greek gods. The rotunda of the Capitol has Washington to this day. You can see him sitting in heaven like a deity. And that's not who he was. And I think he wouldn't have liked that very much.
It's not about what he thought. It's what the people thought. The people thought there was a creator, but didn't intercede. And it needed help. And you don't need help, because the creator provides the energy force to all living and non-living objects, all organic and inorganic, everything in this universe has a certain harmonic energy force from the creator. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Majority of the people in the country are at the first level with their understanding of the neshama. There's a creator, but not necessarily interceding. They have doubt, or what is called das. They have low das, low understanding. They have low das that God intercedes, provides the energy force. They have high das, high understanding that there is a creator. All right, and this is the physical representation of this Kabbalistic metaphysical mechanism that I'm talking about. So, I'm telling you, I understand this extremely well. extremely well where this country is at spiritually. Why I know it, I don't know. It comes very easy to me, just like how COVID came very easy to me. I understood it extremely easy. You know, this here is something very similar. If people in the United States don't elevate their neshama to understand that there is an energy force that is coming from the Creator to all things, then we are in trouble.
Now that I think I know him better, but I think that's part of founding, a new nation. That we need our pantheon of heroes, and Washington was the first and greatest among them.
There's just
the idea
you can tell that Tom, even though he's experienced and he's retired now, he's doing writing. I don't know why he's writing for the Atlantic. He should just enjoy his life. But there's a lack of wisdom. There's a lack of deepness. Like I've just kind of shined a little bit of a light of the deepness of this concept that this interview is about. He hasn't explained it. It's Orange Man bad. He couldn't even explain why the obelisk designs were coming in. It was because of the Egyptology that was coming on board in the beginning of the 1800s. And this whole idea of Das, understanding, this whole idea of creator, intercession and interceding level, and then also the all-knowing level because of the five-dimensional hypercube. But, no, Orange Man is bad. National security didn't say anything about the national security state and all the nefarious things that have been happening, not just modern times, but also in previous epochs. Like the Red Scare. What about Hoover? I mean, Hoover was running, a real legit operation at the FBI. What about Mockingbird? What about all these testing of U.S. citizens without them knowing? Like syphilis or radiation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This election is more crucial, more pivotal than previous ones. It is something that you hear a lot from the left, but you don't necessarily hear that in the same way from the right. I mean, what is your concern for your party, the Republican Party, for America at large, depending on the outcomes?
Well, my former party.
Yeah.
I left several years ago because of Donald Trump. And because of the general drift of the Republican Party, which has become just a cult of personality and a vehicle for power. I think the reason this election, the people...
You think Clinton is not a cult of personality? Come on, Tom. Get real.
We are still using terms like existential. Donald Trump's first term could have been much more terrifying than it was. There were still some people who bottlenecked and obstructed some of the worst things that Donald Trump wanted to do. They won't be there this time. More to the point, you could argue that in 2016...
Let me rewind that because I don't want to, misconstrue what he said, but the impression I got was that he's admitting that people were in his cabinet that bottlenecked what Trump wanted to do, and that they're going to be gone. And that is so fearful because now the national security state has less control. Let's play that again. Make sure I understood that right.
People who bottlenecked and obstructed some of the worst things that Donald Trump wanted to do. They won't be there this time. More to the point,
More to the point, Tom, is that the president leads the executive branch? Not advisors, not his cabinet, nobody else. Who leads the executive branch is the President of the United States, period. Now, you want to talk about treason? That's treasonous. Because you're not doing the will of the representative that was put into office. So you're circumventing the will of the people, not circumventing the will of the president. You're circumventing the will of the people. So this is the point I'm making. If the national security state and the administrative state feels as though they're in the right, they're gonna try to supersede the president. That's a problem, and that is not constitutional.
Argue that in 2016, this was a one-off, that it was a weird election between two deeply unpopular people, Trump and Hillary Clinton, and that Trump cobbled together this kind of freakish outcome in the Electoral College. If he wins in 2024, I'm sorry to say, we're going to have to confront the reality that this is who we are, that this is who a large number of Americans really are, that this is what they want, and they think it's desirable, and they think it's something that they're enjoying. And that's not a functional, healthy democracy. And I think we are no longer the greatest democracy in the world. We're no longer the democracy we once thought we were, that we are, a country that's in democratic decline. Because once you can argue is a mistake or a one-off, twice he tried and was defeated. If he comes in on the third try, then I think you have to just accept that things have changed in this country, and that we are not the country we once were.
Staff writer for the Atlantic, Tom Nichols. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Perhaps the national security state broke the camel's back by its overreach domestically against the citizens of the United States. Perhaps the over-indebtedness by the national security state that made us less productive and have less prowess with manufacturing. And perhaps the concept that's going on in the United States, where it's demonizing family, it's demonizing country, it's demonizing religion, with the ultra-liberal, broke the camel's back. So stop pretending, Tom, that it's Orange Man bad and that caused it, or the people voting for Orange Man bad that caused it. And shine a light on the national security state and how it broke the camel's back. That's where you're going to find the answer. And people are pushing back and saying enough is enough. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support my work, because where else are you going to, learn about why obelisks are in Washington, D.C.? Get the vitamin D3. This is a gene expression cofactor that helps to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis, and it helps to absorb calcium. This is something you should be taking every day, and it is synergistic with vitamin K2. Digestive enzyme complex, very important to reduce the load on your pancreas as we get older. This will break down proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. In addition, this will help you to absorb nutrients. If you work out, this is a great way to refuel your body to do faster recovery. In addition, there are proteolytic enzymes in here that will break up glycoproteins, and bromelain, which breaks up clots because it's fibrinolytic. So please go to my store and get the digestive enzyme complex. Turmeric. It's an antioxidant and it brings down inflammation. That is great for your immune system. Very important. Because in the United States, we have too much inflammation. Probably because we have too many Democrats. Ashwagandha root brings down cortisol levels, also helps to control your glucose levels, and bring down inflammation. It is synergistic with turmeric. Please go to my store and take ashwagandha root and turmeric together. That will help your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. All right, so what's going on in Al Jazeera?
The U.S. presidential election, various polls indicate the race to the White House is tightening. Both Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and the Republican Donald Trump are campaigning in Pennsylvania. It's one of the key battleground states. And some surveys show Harris underperforming in some areas where Democrats traditionally dominate. Analysts have stressed the contest is too close to call, as voting in 7 swing states could tip the scale in anyone's favor. Alan Fisher is joining us from the White House, so we'll keep an eye out on Pennsylvania, Alan, but what do we expect to see there?
Well, it's 3 weeks to the election, so of course the swing states are going to be important, and Pennsylvania is one of the big ones. It's got 19 electoral college votes, and both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will be there on Monday. Kamala Harris is in Erie County, Pennsylvania. That's where Joe Biden won by about 1,500 votes last time, so you can see how tight that race could be. And she is certainly making efforts to make inroads with black male voters, because that is where she's struggling. She still has about 78% support there, but that's way down on what Joe Biden got and way down on what Democrats normally get. As for Donald Trump, well, he is going to be just outside outside Philadelphia. He's going to have a town hall. He's going to talk about women's issues there. He has got to try and get more women on board because he's struggling with them. So you can see that both campaigns, just 3 weeks out from the polling, are now getting very targeted on where they think those few votes could swing, because of course this is going to come down to probably a handful, a few thousand votes in each of those swing states, and they will make the difference come November the 5th.
So how are we to read into that, Alan, that the polls are suggesting such a tight race?
Well, that was always going to be the case, wasn't it? And if you look at national polls, you can always push them aside because they are not really that important. It's going to come down to these important swing states. But certainly the polls don't make happy reading for Kamala Harris. Remember that big bounce she got in the summer? Well, just a few weeks ago, she was 5 points ahead of the Trump campaign, and everyone was buoyed, thinking that this was going to be a sprint to the finish for her. Now the polls are saying they're within the margin of error, that they're tied. She is maybe a slight lead in the national polls by about 1%, but that's essentially nothing. And so the Harris campaign has got to find a way to push through, to shake up the race, to try and get some sort of momentum. As for Donald Trump, he's not getting a lot of new voters. He's not getting undecided voters. What he's getting are Republicans that said, yeah, I'm not going to vote for Trump, but over the last few weeks have changed their mind. There's still 3 weeks to go. There's still a lot of campaigning to go, but this race is incredibly tight. But we knew that was how this was going to play out.
All right, Alan Fisher, thank you so much for that reporting from the White House. Still ahead on the Al Jazeera News Hour, the defending champions New Zealand take a big lead over Great Britain in sailing's America's Cup. We have details coming up with Joe in sports.
Business Latest is sponsored by Intellect Global,
which really sounds high, but it's actually lower than previous years. Donald Trump there making inroads with 15% of the black vote if things were to take place today, and that is important because it's no GOP candidate, no Republican candidate has ever gotten over 10% in these polls, so 15%, almost double what he did last year in 2020. If you look at Joe Biden's number, 92% of the black vote went Joe Biden's way in 2020. So Kamala Harris significantly down on that, although it must be said she was ahead of where Joe Biden was with the black community had he still been a nominee for this time round. Now, that is because a lot of black people and black voters feel like they haven't really had their promises fulfilled to them. They feel like they're constantly being taken for granted as the backbone of the Democratic coalition.
Democrats want blacks to stay on the urban plantation and vote Democrat. They really haven't improved your life that much for decades. Now, if you don't believe me, take a look at your inner city. You really think it's getting better? Most likely it's getting worse. Stop voting Democrat.
In reality, that Democrats have failed to carry through their promises to them, and the Republicans are doing a better job at promising more things to that community as well. And that's important because they're going to be a key swing state in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and also Georgia. Georgia has the third largest black population in the United States, and it is there that Kamala Harris hopes she can make some inroads to swing the state in her favor. But Donald Trump is chipping away at that lead, which could ultimately mean that he will end up getting the keys to the White House come November if the margins remain like this and keep going Donald Trump's way. And the real subset for that is definitely among the men of the black community. That really is where he's starting to make more inroads, and that is where we are starting to see that number fall the Republican way.
A new polling shows that Kamala Harris has so far failed to staunch the flow of Latino voters from the Democratic fold towards Trump, even as he pushes his sharply anti-immigration message. Errol Maxwell has more.
About a quarter of Latino voters in the United States say they're undecided about who to give their vote to. At this town hall event with Kamala Harris in Nevada, some voters remained unconvinced.
Lo que me mantiene indeciso al día de hoy es...
What keeps me undecided as of today is that neither side has shared how their international policy relates to the domestic policies that we have here.
I'm determined not to vote for Donald Trump, but I still have time to decide whether I will vote for her or not vote for president.
With less than 3 weeks to go to Election Day, a New York Times poll shows Kamala Harris underperforming with the Hispanic demographic. 56% say they will vote for her, versus 37% who intend to vote for Donald Trump, a margin that has continued to narrow since 2016. 9% of Biden voters surveyed said they would cast a ballot for Trump this year. Over the weekend, the Republican nominee attended a Hispanic roundtable event.
The Hispanic people have tremendous, they say you can't generalize, but I think you can. They have wonderful entrepreneurship, and they have, you have such energy.
The latest poll shows Harris is particularly weak with male Hispanic voters and on issues like the economy and immigration. Meanwhile, Trump has tightened his grip on the demographic, who seemingly haven't been put off by the Republicans' anti-immigrant message.
We have the worst border in the history of the world. From Africa they come, from Asia they come, the Middle East, South America, yes.
2/3 of Hispanics born in the US said they believed Trump was not referring to people like them when he spoke about immigrants. Half of foreign-born Hispanic voters said the same. Pressure is on for Harris to win some of these decisive swing voters back. The last Democrat to get less than 60% for Latinos was John Kerry, who lost in 2004.
And that's it for this edition. Do stay with us here on Fast 24.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. And get the Goodnight Formula. The Goodnight Formula is a supplement that will help you get into 3 cycles of REM sleep, get into deep sleep, and that's important to be able to detoxify your body, especially your central nervous system, detoxify your neurons, consolidate memory, and to be well rested. Chronic deprivation of sleep can lead to dementia, early onset of dementia, so it's really important to get a good night's sleep. And chronic sleep deprivation will increase your cortisol levels. That will mean that you're going to be in a stress mode, you're going to have more inflammation, and it's going to hurt your immune system and speed your aging process. So good night's sleep will slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the Good Night Formula. Take it every night if you're having a problem sleeping. Many people in the United States have a problem sleeping, and this is your solution. To improve your sleep, improve your memory, detoxify your body, and slow down that aging process of sleep deprivation. Olive leaf extract helps with the immune system and your cardiovascular system. It brings down LDL levels and increases your HDL levels, so it's improving your lipid profile. That will help your heart. And it will also bring down inflammation. That helps your vascular system, and that also helps your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. This is a very high quality product. It's dual purpose. It's great. you can help your immune system and your cardiovascular system. So please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. Lignans, very important to boost up your immune system. It's an antioxidant and it'll bring down inflammation. It's a powder. You mix it with food or with filtered water. Take it every day. This is important. Why? Because we went through the 2020 crisis and people have trashed immune systems. You need to boost up your immune system. Take this product every day to boost up that immune system and to improve your hormonal health. It's for males and females. Take this every day, mix it with your food or with filtered water. There's a little scooper. You take a scoop each day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, so what's going on with, oh, this is the Nobel Prize. Let's listen to that.
Into global inequality. The Turkish-American economist Darren Acemoglu and his colleagues Simon Johnson and James A. Robinson have shown how societal institutions play a role in determining how some countries prosper while others do not. Nina Skero is the chief executive of the Center for Economics and Business Research. She says the winning team's research extended far into the past.
A lot of their work focuses on how persistent institutions are and how having institutions that can take advantage of providing opportunities for its citizens can contribute to wealth. So something that has been relatively novel in their approach, and I'm sure would have contributed to them receiving the prize, is that they looked for examples of natural experiments in historic examples. So some of their work looks at periods of colonization and the types of institutions that countries that were the colonizers implemented in those colonies. So they're saying that if you look at historically over the years, places where colonial powers implemented better institutions actually over the years ended up faring better and generating more wealth, particularly in the periods of time when industrialization came around, and then those areas that had stronger institutions in place were better able to take advantages of industrialization and generate more wealth for their citizens.
Back in a moment with more news on Al Jazeera.
Israeli forces seek to silence the truth in Gaza and the occupied West Bank by indiscriminately killing journalists. Al Jazeera's journalists have paid the price. This is not just an attack on journalism, it's an attack on the world's right to know. The truth must be protected and heard, and the stories of real people must be told. Journalism is not.
All right, I want to go to France 24. It's talking about pessimism.
Serious consequences. France has Europe's highest rate of the usage of antidepressants, for instance, and one of Europe's highest number of suicides. But it must be said also that France has one of Europe's highest fertility rates, the number of children. So the outlook on the future isn't all bleak.
It is not bleak, thankfully. Thank you very much for that, Flo. That's all we have time for. If you have more questions about France or life in France, don't hesitate to reach out to Flo on X. The address is @FloVilmino, and check out our website for previous shows.
What's going on over at
U.S. Deals report. That's fun. That's something to talk about.
I know.
I like it. The wraps up for me and Paul on this wonderful Monday. Coming up, Balance of Power with Joe Matthew is up next. We still have S&P. This is the...
So S&P 500 is at 5,854. Oil is at 73.75. So oil's been trading down basically. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get Myotrol. Myotrol is really important to build up muscle and to maintain muscle mass. As we get older, we need to take supplements to be able to maintain and build new muscle. Myotrol also helps with mitochondrial health. So it's really important to be taking this every day. If you work out and you want to, you're an athlete or you're a bodybuilder, you should be taking Myotrol also. So please go to my store and get Myotrol. It's a very high quality product. Maintain your muscle mass and gain muscle mass. Vitamin K2 and K7, very important to help with your bone health and to help with your cardiovascular system. It's synergistic with D3, so please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is CoQ10. It's the active form for CoQ10. I've been taking ubiquinol for decades. It's a great supplement to take to help with neural health, energy levels, and it is a great antioxidant. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get ubiquinol. This is synergistic with C60 and NAD+. Since we're talking about NAD+, NAD+ brings up energy levels, but it also helps to heal your DNA. As we get older, we get more DNA damage, and we need a little bit of help. So take this supplement to help repair DNA damage. In addition, it also helps with neural health. This is important as you get older. Your energy levels go down, so you need to take NAD+. Your neurons need to be protected, so you don't have neurodegeneration. So NAD+ helps. And when you get older, you have more DNA damage. NAD+ helps. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get NAD+. NAC is a supplement that I've added to my protocol. Why? To bring up your glutathione levels to soak up free radicals. This is another pathway to soak up free radicals. If you've been paying attention to my protocol, it's about antioxidants, strong antioxidants. And you take C60 and you take NAC, strong antioxidants. So please go to my store, get NAC, boost up your glutathione levels to soak up those free radicals. It also helps to detoxify your liver, and this helps to detoxify your kidney, especially if you take acetaminophen. In addition, this will help for your body to reduce anxiety. That's important, all right? A lot of people have ADHD or they have anxiety issues, and NAC can mitigate that issue. And by mitigating anxiety, you go into parasympathetic mode, which is a mode where it's reducing inflammation and it's healing, it's allowing for the body to heal. If you're in sympathetic mode, you are producing more cortisol, you're more inflamed, and your immune system will be less robust over time because of this chronic inflamed sympathetic problem. So NAC will calm you down, all right? It'll reduce that anxiety, it'll mitigate the anxiety. So NAC is a very strong antioxidant because it boosts up glutathione, filter, detoxify your liver and your kidney, and reduce anxiety. All right, let's go to Bloomberg and
for Donald Trump. Well, we're going to be talking with Cliff Young in a moment from Ipsos. This has become a one-point race, maybe a two-point race, anywhere you look, which means a tie race. Is that how you see it?
That's essentially where we are. And some of these national polls, we saw some new numbers over the weekend, have really tightened. Harris was up maybe 3 or 4 points in some of these, and now it's a one-point race. Yeah. This is something you see as you get closer. Some of those people who are undecided break one way or another. But, some of the momentum and, the pulling ahead that Harris was doing in August, early September, a lot of that has flatlined now, and this is going to be a race that is going to be won on the margins, and that's why you see Trump, for example, reaching out to women this week, holding a Fox town hall specifically geared towards women. Harris this morning out with a plan trying to appeal to Black men. So this is both sides of realizing where the weaknesses are.
Where the weak spots are. Do these 11th hour pitches work typically? I mean, we're within 3 weeks here. These are obviously constituencies that we're hoping to get some attention before now.
For Trump, opinions of him are so baked in that may not move the needle a bunch. Harris has been hearing time and time again for voters, we want to know who you are, we want to know what your policies are. So giving people more information, at least it's acknowledging what people are saying they want. However, that does give your opponent more fodder to attack you with. It gives people to find something that they don't like. We heard Obama last week saying that, he's hearing from young black men in particular that they are coming up with excuses to not vote for Harris. And so you see this tension playing out within the Democratic Party.
Interesting to hear Kamala Harris yesterday calling for medical records. I don't know if tax returns are coming up here, but the campaign dispatched Speaker Mike Johnson on to Sunday morning talk shows to speak to Donald Trump's health, which is interesting as someone who's not a doctor speaking here. But what does that tell you about the state of the Harris campaign when we're coming back around on issues like this, with polls showing them within a statistical tie?
They realize that age is an issue in this campaign. Just ask Joe Biden. And so Harris is, she's significantly younger. She, looks at when they're next to each other on the stage. You could really see that during the debate. Trump has been able to avoid a lot of the age-related criticism that Biden was hit with, even though he's only a couple years younger. But this is, something that, our polling shows that people, are worried that, candidates in their late 70s, early 80s are too old to be president.
Trump, though, doesn't he? And he doesn't seem to be weighed down by these questions that he's faced for months.
It's really sort of, like, sort of the Teflon Don, stereotype that a lot of these things that would have been a major issue for other politicians just don't matter for him. He also is sort of advantaged in that because he has a very unique speaking style, Biden, when he speaks, he, is long suffered from a stutter. He sounded old in a way that Trump is sort of like, was that, is that age, or is that just, how Trump's, speaking pattern is?
Exactly, yeah. Everyone ages differently, as we have learned here as well. So tomorrow, pretty important sit down with Donald Trump. It'll be right at this time, right here on this network, with our editor-in-chief sitting down with the former president for the better part of an hour, I suspect. You never know what Donald Trump's going to say. But his closing argument really does seem to be the border. Doesn't matter what question you ask, we come back to the border. What's Kamala Harris's closing argument?
She is trying to craft this economic message of this, opportunity economy. The border is the top issue for many in Trump's base. The economy is sort of broadly the top issue in this race. So she is, talking about, both making her own case on housing, on taxes, on, creating pathways to education, as well as, refuting Trump's policies, which really are centered around tariffs. She's branded them as a national sales tax. Democrats have not been particularly good about coming up with some of these catchphrases to explain these more complex, economic, proposals to the American people. That seems to be one that's sticking.
Great to have some time with Laura Davison. Thank you, Laura, as always, driving our political coverage here in Washington. Bloomberg News politics editor on Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. As I mentioned, we're going to add the voice of Cliff Young here, who's coming in once again from Ipsos with new numbers over the weekend that really get to the demographics that Laura is talking about here. For Kamala Harris, young black men. And there was a conversation on the late edition of Balance of Power here on Friday with Quentin James, president of the Collective PAC, political strategist. Here's what he told Kaylee Lines about this challenge for the Harris campaign. Listen.
I think the Republicans in Congress have done a good job of engaging black men, of going after the black vote. One of my criticisms of the Democrats, and I'm a Democrat and proud of it, is that we haven't spent enough money and done enough work to engage black men on these questions around the economy, on things beyond kind of policing and criminal justice. Those things are important as well. But how do we actually again raise wages, improve work, and build wealth for black men? Those are big concerns. And so there have been efforts from the right to sometimes confuse, but sometimes persuade black men. And so we gotta acknowledge that and recognize that, and go out there and work hard and earn their vote.
This is where we start our conversation with the aforementioned Cliff Young, president, U.S. Public Affairs at Ipsos. He's with us in studio here. Great to see you at the table, as always. Welcome back.
Great to be here.
You're out with new numbers over the weekend that we're going to spend some time on here in your work with ABC News that really helped to drive the conversation. But just broadly speaking, I don't know if it's seasonal depression, if people are feeling weird about what's going on in this country, but everyone woke up with a different idea today. There seemed to be a new feeling. I don't know if it's the fact that this race is tightening, but I keep hearing from people off the record, Democrats and Republicans, that Donald Trump is taking the upper hand in this race. What's happening? What's the backdrop for this feeling?
There's a new normal. And what we can say is that whether it's at the national level or at the state level, there has been a narrowing, ever so slightly. a point here, a half a point there. It's all it takes, right? But there is a concernable and real trend towards Donald Trump. And ultimately, I would make the argument that he right now is winning the framing war over the economy. It's the economy, or more specifically, inflation. And if you go through and look at those ads in the swing states, they really make the connection between the Biden administration and high inflation, the Biden administration and Kamala. They're very, very effective right now.
So when we talk about the constituencies that Kamala Harris is chasing, young black men and suburban women, what you just said fulfills both of those prophecies for Donald Trump, right? That's the why. It's the economy.
Yeah, it's inflation. Okay. And I call them here often Biden's inflation orphans. Kamala was able to bring them back into the fold when she stepped in. Her framing of the opportunity economy has been effective, but not as effective as the inflation message on the Trump side. Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, younger Americans, these are the key constituencies that Donald Trump right now is winning over.
Interesting to think about it this way, because Donald Trump answers every question, as we just said, with the border. And that's what he was talking about largely yesterday. Why not just continue to hammer the economy as your single issue?
Well, Donald Trump, as a spokesman, is a little bit all over the place. Yeah. He's not so focused. The border issues are really important, especially for his base. They mobilize the Republican base. But if you look at those ads that are playing out in the key swing states, they're all about the economy. They're all about inflation.
So let's take a look at what you learned. This is Ipsos ABC News. Among likely voters, we should point out a national poll, 50 to 48% Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump. In September, she led that same poll by 5%. Now, for a lot of people, that sounds like nothing. You're talking about 2 or 3 points, but in a race this close, it's everything.
Yeah, there obviously is a margin there. We have a little bit of a sample bounce here or there, but definitely things have tightened. This will be a game of inches. Indeed, only a few 100,000 votes will matter in those key swing states. And this poll should be concerning for the Harris camp. Obviously, things can change looking forward, but this narrowing definitely benefits Trump and his campaign.
You learned as well, 56% of Americans now favor deporting all undocumented immigrants. That is up 20 points from the first time Donald Trump ran 8 years ago. Maybe he is then choosing the right issue to speak to off the cuff.
Yeah, immigration, deportation, unbridled migration, migrants over the border resonate across party lines, especially in swing states, a swing state like Arizona specifically. It's even an issue that Latinos are divided on. They have certain sort of reservations about the border policy and border policies with the Biden administration. So yeah, it's an issue that resonates.
So when you have, even in the Latino community, divided on this issue, this is a big problem, all right? And I think the Democratic Party is on the wrong side of how to solve it. That's my take.
And maybe it carves off a half a point here, a quarter point there, but there is a method to his madness.
Does history tell us anything about the final weeks of a campaign, the closing 3 weeks that we're in now, as to whether you would see a break in the numbers from here, or is this pretty much what these polls are going to look like on the eve of the election?
It always matters. I think, especially in an electoral scenario like this one, which is so close, up until election day, those critical messages can potentially carve off some voters here or there that can ultimately push the campaign across the finish line. It will matter up to election day.
So could you expect real movement, though, I guess is my question. You're talking about a quarter of a point here. It sounds like this is going to be a 2-point race until we find out who won.
Yeah, we're not going to see jumps like 5 points, but we might see trends one way or the other, ever so slight, ever so soft, but still discernible.
Looks like Kamala Harris has agreed to an interview with Fox News, which is really interesting, seeing her media exposure just last week alone, right? It was Howard Stern, Stephen Colbert. We had the 60-minute shot, and then The View. Most of it pretty friendly interviewers as opposed to a hard-hitting sort of sit down being challenged by a journalist. None would be more than that, I suspect, than Fox News. Do any of these late decisions when it comes to messaging, advertising also promise to move numbers? Or is this something that's fun for me and you to talk about?
Yeah, I think interviews with candidates are important, obviously, but what really matters at the end of the day are those messages in loco, in the swing states, via advertising, via word of mouth. Obviously, if she messes up, that's not good for her. Probably there's more downside for her than upside on Fox. But ultimately, it's going to be the entire opera of communications that matters.
This is going to be Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So here you have our two candidate interviews. Donald Trump right here on Bloomberg tomorrow at noon. Kamala Harris, Fox News, Wednesday at 6. Brett Baer is going to do the interview. What does that tell you, though, about the type of voter she's aiming at when you cross over to do a Fox News interview? She's not looking to turn Republicans into Democratic voters, is she? Is it for the Nikki Haley supporters who are looking for a home?
No, I think she's looking for those inflation orphans. They're on the other side as well. They're working class and lower middle class individuals that might watch Fox for its news value. Specifically, remember, younger Americans, Hispanic Americans, Black Americans, all of which have basically deviated from the fold. They're trying to bring them back in.
Does a pollster like you sit around thinking about October surprises? Or have we had one or two or three already? Is there a moment that moves this race one way or the other that you're waiting for that you can't predict?
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of moments.
We have.
And they've shifted things. It shifted the
Three of
course.
them on the first day of October.
Yeah, it really depends on the event. If there's an event, and what's the qualitative nature of the event? How big and existential is it actually? But ultimately, we're most worried about whether our polls are right. We have the level right, because it's oh so close that a point off in one direction or the other could really define the day.
Do you secretly hope that it's not that close for the sake of the country, that we have a clear winner after November 5th?
Well, to be quite frank, as a pollster, I secretly hope that it is that close because our polling is showing us that close.
Okay. All news is local, apparently. But even the candidates themselves are saying it now. Let's hope for a blowout so we aren't doing this for a month after Election Day.
Yeah, we have the day after issue. To what extent will the American population accept the
Can
results?
you hold on that?
Yeah.
The extent to which Americans are prepared to wait?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, we know that a supermajority of Americans say they will accept the results. Republicans are a little bit more sort of wishy-washy because they think the result probably won't be fair, or more than likely not to be fair. But time really matters. The longer it takes to count and get it together, the less likely people are to believe the results.
Which is troubling because it took us till Saturday last time. We can do it again. Cliff Young with us live in Washington from Ipsos. This is Bloomberg.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite that I have. This helps to detoxify heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals out of your body, especially forever chemicals. Take 2 drops underneath your tongue, swallow with filtered water, take it every day, and you can do that throughout the whole year. Some people will detoxify their body by just doing a detox once or twice a year. So you can take, about a few drops underneath your tongue, drink it with filtered water until the bottle is done. Do that every day until the bottle's done. And then maybe do that once or twice a year. It's up to you. But you can take zeolite year-round. This type of zeolite you can take year-round. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And C60, very strong antioxidant. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, in extra virgin olive oil, and avocado oil in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon of it a day. Take it every day. They'll soak up those free radicals. It's a very potent antioxidant. This will soak up those free radicals, reduce the stress on the cell, so that'll improve cellular function and tissue function. In addition, it'll improve the mitochondrial health of the cell, and you'll have more ATP, so you'll have more energy. That's very important for the cell's function and for your immune system. So please go to the store and get the C60, either an extra virgin olive oil MCT coconut oil, or avocado oil in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. You should be taking C60 every day. Very high quality product, and it'll soak up those free radicals and slow down the aging process. That's the transmission today. Please follow all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. If you could, please donate on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee, or be a paid member to my Patreon channel. You can get all those links from the description of this video. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.